Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Franhar Hart, owner of Fabulous Frogs and Happy Haberty. The name is a bit long-winded, but a one-of-a-kind store must have a name to match naturally. And my humble establishment truly is one of a kind. If you just dropped in to try on a few dresses or browse the cufflinks, you'd certainly never notice anything special. The normal appearance is essential for keeping both my store and my customers safe. And the revenue from the handmade clothing in the front room helps me pay the rent and eat every day. As you all know, the facade and the true nature rarely overlap. Although I love sewing clothes and collecting beautiful accessories, my true passion lies in an entirely different profession. In fact, this entire store is just a shell so I can discreetly offer that service. When you're in a unique business like this, anonymity is everything. You don't think I'd be foolish enough to give you my real name. I'm content running the front, but I truly live for the moments when I get to use my true expertise. The other profession is much more challenging and brings a more special kind of fulfillment. Whenever a customer steps in and the door chimes, I serve them normally until they utter the predetermined phrase. At that point, my heart leaps, and I get to work fulfilling their request. For these special customers, I offer a changing service, and I mean a complete whole-body change in the most literal sense possible. My customers walk in with their old appearance and step out as a completely different person. Everyone wants to escape their old skin and try something new once in a while. What's wrong with a little change? I have a stock of hundreds of outfits, or rather, better words are left behind by old customers in exchange for a completely new look. People come to me for all sorts of reasons, but rarely are they positive. I don't judge. If I did, my revenue would surely plummet. But the exact location of the store is usually only found by those in a state of desperation, fear, or needing to escape a person or something they are. Most are surprised to find that friendly neighbor Franhar Hart is the person they've been searching for all along, that the service they urgently need is right here in the unsuspected little shop down the street. However, the girl I served this afternoon was different. I had never met her before. Maybe she was from out of town. I wouldn't be surprised if word of the store had spread beyond my immediate area. In fact, I had another out-of-town customer a few days ago. This girl was quite pretty, slender, with golden blonde hair that could be natural or cost a fortune to dye exactly that way. She approached the counter where I was sitting, flipping through a fabric catalog and circling samples for a future order. "Excuse me, are you Franhar Hart?" she asked cautiously, her blue eyes darting back and forth. "You got the right person," I replied, standing up tall in front of her. I'm naturally tall. "Do you need a dress? I just got a beautiful new style in, a sweetheart neckline that would really show off." The young girl shook her head vigorously. "No, Fran, I know you sell more than just dresses." Blinking rapidly, I decided to play dumb. I'm very good at it, so much so that I could have had a promising acting career if fate hadn't led me to run this store. "I'm sorry, I don't quite follow you." "Oh dear," she muttered, rolling her eyes at her own mistake. "Well, I want to see what you have in the back room. I'm interested in a custom tailoring." My slogan is as discreet as the store itself. Without another word, I walked to the front door and locked it, flipping the sign from "We're open, come on in" to "Oh, we're closed." I motioned for the girl to follow me with a wave of my hand as I pulled back the black curtain on the wall behind the cash register. We both ducked under the archway into the back room. A large storage space littered with mannequins, some clothed, some bare, a large table in the middle of the room, and a pair of chairs tucked around the corner of the table. I pointed to one chair and sat down in the other, facing her. A look of confusion crossed the girl's face. Where are they? Don't I get to browse?" "Not exactly," I answered, pointing to the chair opposite. I waited until she sat down before continuing. "This isn't the kind of shopping you're used to, but the system is simple, and I like to keep it that way. No browsing, no trying things on. You tell me what you want, what kind of change, and why, and I'll use that information to give you the change you need." Okay," she nodded in agreement, though I still sensed a little discomfort. "How much does this cost?" "No more than what you're willing to give up," I sighed, picking up the notepad left on the table and clicking open a pen. "You will lose your old appearance after I put you in the new one. From there, I'll use it as I wish, either giving it to someone else or disposing of it, depending." Nodding slowly, she seemed to be contemplating internally, weighing whether the terms were worth the value of my service. They all do, and they all end up saying, "Okay, let's do it." Smiling warmly, I said, "Great. Now, why don't you start telling me why you need such a major change?" Well, she began in a timid voice, crossing her arms tightly over her chest. I just got out of a bad marriage. While taking notes, I interjected, "That's good. Finally had the courage to put yourself first." She laughed softly before replying, "Well, it was much easier to cut ties when he went to prison." Ooh, I raised an eyebrow. "He's serving a life sentence for a few murders and dozens of other charges," she explained, sighing. "There were about 10 victims or more. When I met him, he was just the nicest man I'd ever met, a real gentleman. But over time he changed, or maybe I just saw his true self. He quickly became controlling, put me down, and sometimes hit me. I only saw how warped he was when I came home early one night from visiting family and he had a girl tied up in the bedroom. I didn't know what to do. I panicked and froze," she explained, closing her eyes for a moment. "My husband was very manipulative. He calmed me down and convinced me not to tell anyone. I don't know what happened to that girl either." Exhaling sharply, I asked, "But then there were more victims?" The young girl nodded in response. "He said the dark side inside him needed to be released, that he would be a better husband if I let him do it. And he actually treated me better after that night. No more hitting, exactly like the man I fell in love with. I could get some strong prescription drugs at my workplace, and he convinced me to steal some for him, saying that if he gave them to the girls, they wouldn't remember what happened. And you did that." "Yes, I did," she admitted, her frame looking even smaller as she spoke. "I knew it was wrong, but I was so scared of him, I still did it. He was so nice to me that it seemed okay in a strange way. This went on for a few years, but I always left after giving him the drugs. I only found out he had escalated to murder when I caught him shoving a large handbag into the back of his truck. It was the body of one of his victims." Tears fell from her bright eyes as she continued. "The police caught him soon after. I avoided charges thanks to my testimony, and because I helped find some videos as evidence. But I've become a complete outcast in the community. I'll never be able to continue my life with this appearance. But more than that, I'm afraid my husband will find me if he successfully appeals." She cried silently for a few minutes before pulling a crumpled tissue from her pocket and blowing her nose. I finished my notes, although I already knew exactly what to do with her. "I know exactly what suits you," I stated, getting up to gather my supplies: a plastic sheet, a jar of bright green liquid, a pair of fabric shears, a large needle, and a roll of thick thread. Spreading the plastic sheet on the table, I motioned for her to get onto the tabletop. "Oh, and drink this," I added, handing her the small bottle of liquid. Shrugging, she tilted her head back and poured all the bright green fluid down her throat in one gulp. She passed out immediately, and I began my work. First, I cut along her torso, branching out to the limbs, hands, feet, and finally, the face. My tools are unlike anything else. This special pair of fabric shears slices cleanly through the skin with very little blood loss. I peeled the skin off her body, starting with the large sections, then individual fingers and toes. With this girl, now a blank slate, I went to the locker compartment along the back wall, using a key to unlock a substantial collection of appearances. They are essentially a series of hollow human skins preserved by some unknown force. Flipping through the collection, I found the look I had chosen and took it off the hanger before draping it over one arm to carry back to the table. Spreading it evenly underneath is the hardest part, but once that's done, the transformation process is completed soon after. Moving from the periphery inward, I stitched the new appearance snugly around the young girl, pushing the needle through the skin and pulling the thick thread to form tight stitches. Like the shears, these supplies are unique. The roll of thread never runs out, and the thread dissolves into the skin as I work, seamlessly fusing the flesh. I wish I could say where these supplies came from, but I was not the original owner of this store. I was once just a customer myself. The young girl began to stir about 20 minutes after I finished. I like to do a dramatic reveal, like in TV makeover shows, so I tied a blindfold on her. "Don't worry, dear," I comforted, leaning down to take her hand. "Let me lead you to the mirror." With a little effort, she sat up and stepped off the table, following me to an ornate standing mirror in the corner of the room. Loosening the blindfold, I let it drop to the floor as she looked at her new appearance. "What is this? What is this?" she exclaimed, eyes wide with shock as she stepped closer to her reflection. I had dressed her in a recently acquired appearance from a rail-thin girl with short, mousy brown hair, covered in scars, and a perpetually weary face. "This is you now," I replied, though this did nothing to ease the young girl's alarm. "I got this look from a recent customer. She came to me because she only felt pain when she looked in the mirror but never understood why. She cut her hair short, slashed her body with razors, and starved herself almost to death, but still couldn't find the source of the pain inside. until a few months ago, when a police officer informed her that she had been identified as one of the victims of a predator they had just caught, who kept video recordings of what he did to these girls. They were all drugged into unconsciousness, I explained, sighing heavily. When you came here and started telling me what your husband did, it didn't take me long to put it together. She was one of his victims. Her lower lip trembled as she stammered, but I didn't do anything to her. A short laugh escaped my mouth. I know, child, but that's the problem. You did nothing to stop him, and you even provided him with the tools to continue. And she had to live with all this pain, partly because of you. My voice softened. I continued. I believe your fear of him prevented you from speaking up. However, I can't let you leave the store without making sure you won't let the same thing happen again. The pain you feel in your body is the pain she endured for years. That pain now belongs to you, I explained, sweeping over the countless pink, raised scars covering the new skin wrapped around her arm. This pain will be a daily reminder to do something, say something next time. God forbid there is a next time. You must prevent the same thing from happening. Through her tears, she nodded in silent acceptance before gathering her belongings. I led her to the front of the store and watched to make sure she got into her car safely. It was well past my normal closing time, so I flipped the lock on the door as soon as her car left the street, pulling a half-empty bottle of BB from beneath the counter to pour myself a few fingers of whiskey. Sometimes I need a little help to relax after a long day of work, and getting adequate rest is very important. Tomorrow is a new day, and a new day means more customers. I understand many of you will feel I was too lenient with her, but I believe her. I try to see the good in people, even in such dark situations. As for those who think I was too strict in deciding her new appearance, she knew exactly what she was getting into. The risks were fully disclosed. I tell her and every customer seeking custom tailoring that at Franhar Hart's Fabulous Frogs and Happy Haberty, you don't always get what you want, but I always ensure my customers get what they need. I truly appreciate your interest in the stories coming in and out of my little store. This profession is my passion, but since I always kept it almost completely secret, I wasn't sure how others would receive it. I must admit I held my breath when I told the story about the last customer, but I'm overjoyed that I did. It felt like a weight lifted off my chest to finally be able to share such an important part of myself after hiding it for so long. I want to clarify a few things from the other day before telling today's story. First, someone asked how I handle returning customers. You're right to think I have some unhappy customers, people whose assigned appearance doesn't match what they imagined when they came in. Although I deliver appearances based on what I believe is needed, I also know that human needs change over time. While many customers accept this, and many of the appearances I deliver are more positive than the previous story, I still have former customers who come in to request what I call retailoring. When this happens, the interview process is repeated to determine what has changed since the last encounter, and more importantly, what, if anything, they have learned from living in someone else's skin. I have completed retailorings, and I'm actually quite open to it. Since most of my appearance decisions are geared towards a more positive direction, there's a sense of permanence in my choices, as many customers don't ask for a change. These cases usually make for less interesting stories for this audience. Although I have noted a few that seem like they would be suitable for later use. Having said that, there is still a reevaluation process to consider whether I was too harsh or whether the desired appearance has been achieved yet. I'll share one or two such cases with you when the time is right. Back to business as luck would have it. Yesterday, I had another customer come in for a custom tailoring. He was a neat, middle-aged man with a charming smile, wearing expensive-looking t-shirt and jeans. I knew right away he was looking for more than a new tie as soon as he walked into the store because he was wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses to conceal his identity and blend into the crowd. Clearly, he didn't want to be seen, or that he needed a change to ensure he could hide in plain sight. Still, I waited for him to come to the counter and mumble, I'm looking for a custom tailoring," before revealing himself. "Yes, sir," I replied, closing the store before pulling back the black curtain with one hand to move the discussion into the back room. I spent a few minutes explaining the terms of the custom tailoring to him as we sat down. He agreed to everything immediately without seeming to deliberate at all. With his fully informed consent, we proceeded to the interview portion of the tailoring, notepad in my lap and pen ready. I asked, "So, sir, what brings you here today?" "I'm here because my career just took a major hit, one I don't think I can recover from," he began, reluctantly taking off his sunglasses and hat to reveal a familiar face, a face that elicited instant recognition. I suppressed a reaction, instead focusing my energy on frantic note-taking. I wouldn't be surprised if you know me, but if not, I'm a politician in this area. I'm about to finish my first term, and I was running for re-election. Victory seemed certain until recently. I asked a question whose answer I already knew. What happened? The politician wrung his hands restlessly in his lap. I attended a social event a few weeks ago, and I was overconfident. I drank too much and let my guard down. The conversation turned to politics, as it always does, and I made some unsavory remarks about my opponent. He paused hesitantly. Some racist remarks, he whispered as if the whole city didn't already know. Someone recorded my foolish rant on their phone, and the footage was played on every major news channel just a few days later. This certainly wasn't the first time I've been caught in an embarrassing position with my statements, but this is the first time people have really paid attention and cared. The public even forgave me when it was revealed that I had participated in a racially motivated assault in my youth, but trash talking was apparently a step too far. Seeing himself getting off topic, he cleared his throat slightly before finding his thread again. Listen, I know I'm not, well, politically correct, but you have to understand that I wasn't sober at the time. I mean, everyone says stupid things when they're drunk, right? One could say that, I replied non-committally, not looking up from my notepad. He sighed exaggeratedly as he emphasized, I'm here not only because my career, everything I've worked hard for, is ruined, which isn't really my fault, but for more than that. I come from a family that demands excellence, prominence in society. From childhood, I was expected to follow my father and enter politics. I didn't really want it, but more than that, I didn't want to disappoint my family, so I devoted myself to that path. However, there was a problem. I genuinely lacked the necessary qualities to be a successful politician. I'm naturally introverted, and I have poor communication skills. I was a remarkably average student, lacking drive or ambition or anything resembling self-confidence. He admitted, shaking his head at what he perceived as his own shortcomings. So when I met a group of people who could change that for me, I seized the opportunity. They are a secret organization, very influential but unknown to the public. They made me an offer I couldn't refuse, as people say. They would perform a ritual to grant me the charisma I always lacked, a silver tongue that would elevate me through the ranks to political success, the man declared. Slightly skeptical, I reminded myself to consider the possibility of such a procedure. I mean, given the unbelievable nature of my profession, I really had no reason to doubt his story. A ritual? The politician smiled awkwardly despite himself, as if he wished he had thought more carefully before. Yes, a ritual, he confirmed, adjusting his posture. Before his perfect posture, I suddenly realized my shoulders were slumped, my neck craned over my notepad. I was skeptical at first too, but the feeling of desperation to succeed drove me to their heavily guarded headquarters. The men wore black cloaks, and they took me to a large, unfinished basement. In the middle of the room, one of the men set out a cup of water, a candle, and a pile of small, scattered seeds. Then he used a knife to carve a complex symbol into the dirt floor, lit the candle, and placed the knife next to the other objects. The men began to chant, and I just stood there, utterly confused, until a figure appeared in the middle of the room. It had the body of a man with a heavy book in its hand. I understood that the figure couldn't just be a man when I saw its face, or rather its faces, he clarified, grimacing at his own recollection. Its head was just a synthesis of faces stitched together in a way that they disgustingly overlapped. The lower half of a beautiful woman's face was obscured by the snarling mouth of a fierce-looking man. Disgusting. He hesitated slightly before continuing. The leader of this organization spoke to it by the name Danielin and requested his teachings on politics and charisma, his assistance in my rise to power. At once, I knew everything I needed to know to become a successful politician. He also revealed the secret thoughts of those in power I would be dealing with, secrets that would be helpful as I advanced to the top. Such things rarely come without a price, I murmured cautiously. The politician laughed softly despite himself, as if he wished he had thought better before. In exchange, I would obey this secret organization throughout my career, and if I wavered in my loyalty or if I lost public favor, I would be of no further use to them, and they would come to collect their debt by taking my life. Nodding, I deduced, and now you are sure to lose the election. They are definitely coming to collect the debt. I took a moment to review my notes, licking my lips as I considered the key information before stating, I have something that fits. I won't bore you with another long description of the custom tailoring process. It is largely the same among customers. I suppose the reveal is what many are more interested in. The politician woke up shortly after the tailoring was completed, and I eagerly led him to the mirror before removing the blindfold. "What?" he asked groggily as he ran a hand over his now spiky-haired head, staring with a slack jaw at his new exterior. The man I took this look from came to me years ago, covered head to toe in tattoos. As you can see, there are plenty of patterned tattoos all over your arms and legs, plus a rather bold neck tattoo. I explained, pointing at the large letters etched into his neck, spelling out OFF. The real piece de resistance of this look, though, is the face tattoo. I said, gesturing towards the tattoo stretching across the left of his new face, a tattoo that extends over his natural features to create an entirely new face. The area around his eyes has been shaded to create the appearance of sullen hollows, and an eerie, inky smile has been drawn on from the corners of his mouth. A detailed horn has been etched across the left side of his forehead. He swore up and down that he was accepting and tolerant of all people, but his actions and words have shown the opposite. He was always two-faced like Dantalian. Now it's just reflected in his appearance. My career is ruined," he remarked, blinking. "I will never be able to run for office again." "I'd say you ruined your own career," I countered, taking a deep breath to add, "You were right about one thing. This is not the first time you've used your power for harm, and I don't believe it would be the last. You spent years in office denigrating entire groups of people. You assaulted a man solely because of the color of his skin and got away scot-free because of your connections. But not this time. You've shown no remorse or desire to change your ways, so I find this acceptable." The man stammered as he tried to find words to counteract my decision, gaping at his reflection in the mirror. I cut him off first, frustrated to think he might be disregarded for an aspect of his appearance he could not control. "You are silent. You still get to leave this place with your life. You are in better shape than when you arrived. You might even learn a thing or two from this. And while I don't think just having tattoos says anything about a person's competence, I know the current system, the one you've played and benefited from for years, will reject you the moment they see you. A man like you shouldn't have a place in politics." I know it's been a while since the last update, but to say I've been busy is an understatement. For those of you just stopping by for the first time, I'm Fran Hart of Fran Hart's Fabulous Frogs and Happy Haberdashery. To most acquaintances, I'm just a simple seamstress and shop owner, but I provide a very special service for those in the know. Full-body transformations for clients in need of a brand new identity. My clients might not always get what they want, but I ensure they get what they need. Some of you have wondered about whether I would take on children or teenagers for custom fits. I've only done one myself, but I know it's been done before I took over the shop. While not often, I confess I was quite surprised to find looks that proved this in the wardrobe. Though I consider these cases more thoroughly, I did provide a custom fit for a young girl who was in clear and immediate danger, the kind of danger that couldn't be resolved by more conventional means. This young girl, barely 13 at the time, came to me several years ago. I have a children's collection in the front of the store, so I thought she was just popping in to try on something for a school dance. Maybe a nice Sunday dress. It wasn't until she approached the counter that I knew she was looking for more than an addition to her wardrobe. She wore baggy sweatpants and an oversized hoodie. The hood was drawn up over her head, her hair tucked away, and she walked carefully with her head down. When she lifted her face to look at me, her expression had betrayed her before she confirmed my suspicions by whispering, I'm interested in a custom fit." I closed the front of the shop, turned off the lights, and drew the curtains. Extra security measures have to be taken in these situations. Before leading her into the back room, I invited her to sit at the table before explaining the process to her, taking care to explain it thoroughly. After she consented, I began the consultation. "What brings you here today, my dear?" The girl glanced quickly around the room before beginning. I haven't had an easy life," she said in a soft voice, her body clearly tense in the chair. "I'm the oldest in my family. I have 2 younger brothers, and my parents always treated me differently. I guess I am different too, but I always felt like I was, the black sheep of the family. My parents were like that with me, too, never really understood me," I offered with a warm smile. "I'm sorry, that sounds rough." The girl relaxed a little, pulling the hood down to reveal short, choppy black hair and a dark, oval-shaped birthmark in the center of her forehead. Looking at her facial features, she appeared underweight, though it was hard to tell for sure because of her baggy clothes. "Yeah, it is," she mumbled. "My parents were really distant when I was young, and my brothers didn't really want to be close to me either. I think that's why I've always had, issues with other people, especially when I started school. Any little thing would set me off. I'd get mad at another kid for taking a toy I wanted, or I'd get frustrated with a teacher and I'd just blow up. I'd flip the slate and lash out at anyone who tried to come near me. A few years ago, my parents decided to pull me out of school. I'd learned the basics of reading and math by then, and picking me up early a few days a week was more trouble than just homeschooling me. They didn't do much teaching though, even though I love learning, as long as I get to choose what I want to learn. The young girl sighed, a clear look of sadness in her hazel brown eyes. They didn't seem to care about me or my future at all, never once asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. Looking up from my notepad, I asked, "And what did you want to be when you grew up, my dear?" She shrugged lazily, as if indifferent to my question, but a slight smile betrayed her. "I always wanted to make things like jewelry or something. I'm really good at it. I didn't care for a lot of the stuff they taught in school, but I loved creating things. My parents kind of let me do the beating, but never tried to do it with me. I taught myself a lot of what's necessary to have a jewelry shop, like wiring and money math. I'm sure they just faked all the work to prove I was learning everything I was supposed to be learning." She scoffed, shaking her head. "It sounds weird, but I was pretty happy during the times they left me alone. They started paying more attention to me when I turned 12, and not in a good way." I jotted a note down as a sinking feeling spread in my stomach. "What do you mean?" I was still having real trouble getting along with my family. It's hard to explain, but I'd get angry and see red. My brothers were running around the house yelling one time, and the next thing I knew, the kitchen was destroyed. I didn't even realize what I'd done until I saw the broken plates on the floor, the table flipped over. She confessed timidly, blinking. The girl suddenly looked over her shoulder, then back at me. "My parents believe I'm possessed or something. They looked up some things online and decided to try an exorcism. They would hold me down and scream Bible verses in my face. I just screamed back. I didn't know what they were doing, and it wasn't making anything better. They barely fed me, and I lost a lot of weight. I tried to control my behavior, but it was hard when I felt like no one cared enough to ask what was wrong, felt like no one cared about me at all. I had another episode last night," she continued. "I was doing some beating, and my mom was yelling at me to put it away and go to bed. I kept telling her I just needed to string a few more beads and I'd be done, but she just snatched the necklace off the board, and all the beads went flying, scattering across the floor." The girl explained, wringing her hands together, her bony knuckles protruding. I snapped out of it to find I had smashed the lamp on the table and dumped out all the drawers. When the girl paused, I took a moment to catch up on my notes. What happened after that? Her bottom lip trembling, she replied, "They called a friend from church to help with another exorcism. They tied my hands and feet to the bedpost, and the screaming started again. I really hate the noise. It just makes me so scared. I didn't know what to do, didn't know what they wanted from me, so I just thrashed in the bed, crying. Finally, I just closed my eyes. A few minutes later, I heard the door fly open. I opened my eyes to see a strange man in a dark hat standing over the man from the church on my bed. Well, kind of. His body was there for a moment before it slumped to the floor, but his head was in the stranger's hand, cleanly severed," she continued, tears welling in her eyes. My parents were cowering before the stranger. The man slowly walked toward me, placing his thumb on my birthmark. He chuckled to himself as he said simply, "Soon." Then he left. Who was he?" I asked carefully. The girl hung her head, sniffling. "I don't know, but it sounds like my parents do." I demanded they tell me what was going on. They said that my mom couldn't have children, and after years of trying everything the doctors suggested, they summoned a demon or something. He offered them the ability to create a family in exchange for ownership of the firstborn child. And that was me. I breathed out. She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Exactly. They expected they would just have me and hand me over, but they didn't fully understand what they agreed to. When I was born, the strange man visited to tell them he would come back for me later, when I became a woman, to take me as one of his wives. My parents tried to fight it. They didn't want to get to know me all those years only to have to give me up. My dad said they would run away and take me with them. But the strange man leaned down to me and pressed his thumb to my forehead, etching a mark into my skin. He said that way, he would always be able to find me. She wept brokenly, fiercely rubbing her palms over the darkened spot in the middle of her forehead as if to erase it. My mother and father resented me because they didn't want to love me, didn't want to have hope for my future when I didn't have one. She raged before finally dissolving into sobs. I slid a box of tissues closer to her on the table, tears stinging in my own eyes. The girl dried her tears and blew her nose into a tissue. "Thank you," she mumbled, her voice thick. "My mom and dad were using the exorcisms as a last-ditch effort to get the strange man to leave me alone, starving me so I wouldn't have my first period to buy me time. I ran away early this morning to find you. I found out who you really were a couple of years ago when I just wanted to get away from my parents, back before I knew any of this. And even though I'm glad the strange man stopped the exorcism last night, I don't want to be married, not to anyone, but especially not to anything strange like him. But it seems like that choice was made for me even before I was born, and as long as I have this mark, he'll be able to find me," she stated calmly, almost detached from the horrifying reality she found herself in through no fault of her own. "I don't know if his mark goes any deeper, but please just check, and if it does, please just kill me." Immediately following the consultation, I asked her to relax on the table. She was sound asleep within seconds of drinking the green liquid I offered. I was worried as I peeled back the layers of skin on her face, but thankfully found nothing amiss. No trace of evil was inside the poor girl. She seemed almost surprised when she awoke afterward, as if she had thought her situation hopeless. I avoided blindfolding her, not wanting to cause her any more stress, but still led her by the hand to the mirror as she was quite dizzy. "Oh my," she said simply, as she caught the first glimpse of her new self in the mirror. Her new fiery red hair, skin full of freckles. "I love this dress and the necklace too." "I'm glad you like it," I replied, my cheerful tone dimming as I pointed to her face where a large heart-shaped birthmark spread across her left cheek, the color of deep port wine. "Your options were limited. This was the most appropriate bit of ironic justice for you." "Sorry." "Are you kidding?" she cheered, jumping toward the mirror for a closer look. "I love it." I often think of this custom fit to remind myself that not all my clients leave the shop in a state of collapse or anger. In fact, not all my clients leave the shop, at least not this one time. She goes by a different name now, Renee, and her jewelry collection sits in the display case below the counter where I'm typing these lines as she naps in the room upstairs. She's thrived under my care, happily pursuing the life she wants, a life she got to choose for herself. Ren is a constant reminder that I can do good in this world. Hello, friends. I hope you've all been well this past week. I was truly surprised and delighted with all the kind comments about Ren's story last time. It warmed my heart to know you understood how much I care for the girl, and more so that you finally saw that my custom fits can be done with good intentions. While I dispense looks for the purpose of justice when needed, many of my custom fits are actually done to improve my clients' lives. If I didn't, I would be going against the very traditions that afforded me a comfortable new identity in a time of need. Now I'm going to fulfill a request by telling you all about another client I had about a year ago. I won't specify which request this is. That wouldn't be any fun, would it? So you'll have to follow along and see. This client walked into my shop about a year ago. The jingle of the bell gave me pause about him because the shop was empty at the time. He was a man in his late 20s with a very plain appearance, just a standard guy, average height with short black hair and no distinguishing marks or features, dressed simply in jeans and a t-shirt. Immediately, I found myself hoping he was there for a custom fit. I coveted his styleless look the most. You know the type so pedestrian that he's almost unnoticeable in a crowd. The kind of guy you could pass 20, 30, 100 times without noticing. The kind of guy who blends into the background without even trying. These are the kinds of looks I'm constantly on the lookout for to bestow upon future clients. So imagine my delight when he approached the counter and uttered the catchphrase for the custom fit service. I closed up the shop and hurried him into the back room to begin the consultation. After I laid out the terms of the custom fit process, he consented without hesitation. "All right, tell me about yourself. Why are you here today?" I started, clicking open my pen and setting the notepad in my lap, crossing my legs. He pursed his lips into a straight line, as if reluctant to explain his position. There was a certain detachment and apathy in his demeanor that immediately put me on guard, but I just kept staring at him, blinking until he finally started to speak. "Well, I know this isn't going to make me sound like the best person in the world," he warned, rolling his eyes ever so slightly in a way that seemed outside his own awareness. "But I need you to know I'm not a bad guy." Nodding, I jotted a note down to acknowledge this preemptive statement, though I've rarely met a good guy who has to declare he's not a bad guy. I found myself grateful for the knife I kept tucked into the pocket of my dress. Something was off about him. "Don't worry, you aren't the first person to sit in that chair for unfortunate reasons. Go on." Okay, he replied simply, though he seemed to relax a little, knowing he wasn't the first of his kind to stop by. "My girlfriend was found murdered a couple of weeks ago. We had our ups and downs like any normal couple, but we were doing okay overall. Things were sweet at first, like they always are, but a few months in, I started feeling her pulling away from me. I made completely reasonable requests, like not wearing a certain dress out or avoiding seeing her male friends alone, and she would just blatantly ignore everything I said." The bland young man sighed heavily, frustration evident, taking a moment to calm himself before he was ready to continue. "I was just trying to keep her safe, keep her happy with me, but she seemed like she was about to leave me. So I did what any reasonable man would do when the love of his life might leave at any moment. I tried to regain control of the situation." "Oh, and how did you do that?" I asked, the customer service smile still pasted on my face to hide my growing alarm. Shrugging, he replied, "I explained to her the real reasons behind my requests, but that didn't work. She was always too emotional, always failing to see the logic I clearly presented that the men in her life were just waiting for a chance to steal her away. When it became clear I couldn't make her understand, I turned to the internet for suggestions, where I stumbled across a website that promised to give me the tools to keep a woman in my life. There was a magical element to it all. Something I was skeptical of, but it was coupled with concrete actions that made the site seem legitimate. First, I had to make a kind of, well, I guess love potion is the best word for it, made of some herbs and a few drops of my blood. I concocted it quickly and cooked her favorite dinner, tossing the mixture into her portion. We'd argued that morning, and I swear as soon as she walked in and just smelled that potion, she was overcome with love for me, telling me how much it meant to her that I took the time to cook for her, he explained, chuckling through a wide smile. No obvious unique features to his teeth, I noted, so it worked. His facial expression returned to its baseline of frigid neutral apathy, almost too well. Over the next few months, she started losing things. She would misplace her phone, keys, wallet, computer. I was always able to find them, assuring her that whatever she lost was right where she last used it. She struggled with that a lot. She seemed like she was on the verge of collapsing at any moment, leaning on me to keep her steady. Soon, she started complaining about all the messages she was getting from anonymous people online. She was being stalked and harassed. She was getting terrible, humiliating messages at all hours. She even had to run home a few times after being followed by strange men. I was busy taking notes, trying to suppress a shudder at the thought of being chased in the dark by some stranger as I walked home late at night. She was in a constant state of paranoia. She couldn't tell if she was being stalked. Whether there were ghosts in our house, she needed me and she loved me, he stated, looking down at his lap. He started rubbing his palms together nervously as he continued. That is, until she found out. Found out what? I urged. The man snickered. She thought she was losing her mind, so she started looking into what was happening to her. I guess she found an online group of people having the same experience, only to discover their partners were manipulating them, he replied, raising his hands to make air quotes before dropping them to his knees. I had software installed on her computer, forwarding her activity to mine, so I knew everything. And apparently, she'd been talking privately to one of her friends about coming to get her out from under me. Now listen, I loved her, and I wasn't going to lose her. I confronted her with the proof of her betrayal, and she just lost control with me. Even when I relented and admitted that I was the one moving her things, that I had plugged her phone number into the website to send those messages, that I had been following her. She couldn't see that I was protecting her. There are real men out there who would hurt her if given the chance. I was just showing her that was a possibility, he ranted, shaking his head in amazement as he rubbed his fingertips across his wrinkled forehead. The website specifically said, if my girlfriend found out about the potion or anything in it, well, the magic would be broken, and she would never love me again. I interjected, tapping the top of my pen against my temple, a nervous habit of mine. That must have been very hard for you to accept. He nodded vehemently. Yeah, it was. I kind of blacked out, I guess. When I came to, she was on the bed, no longer breathing. In a panic, I deleted all mentions of the so-called manipulation from all our devices, fearing the evidence would lead to suspicion of the friend who was coming to rescue her, he smirked. And then I left, creating a pretty decent alibi for myself and waiting for her boyfriend to find her. Don't get me wrong, I know it's not right to frame him, but he was obsessed with her. He probably would have hurt her if he'd got her alone. She just wouldn't listen. I have connections with the police department who steered the investigation to focus on him. I mean, it wouldn't be right for me to go to jail. I have a future. I'm smart at the top of my field, and she pushed me to do what I did. He insisted, clenching one hand into a fist, and he's a loser. He used her trust to sweet-talk her away from me. He'd had run-ins with the law before, so of course he was a good suspect. But he went into hiding before they could dig up enough evidence to catch him, and I believe he's out for revenge against me. I can't live the rest of my life constantly looking over my shoulder, always worried that he's one step behind me. I have to disappear, and I need a new identity to do it properly. I need your help. After scribbling the last note, I clicked my pen shut. I have exactly what you need. Though he was initially a bit wary about drinking the sedative liquid, he did so and was unconscious just a few minutes later for the official fitting. I gave him a little extra just in case to keep him down. Choosing the look was quick and easy. I knew exactly what I was going to put him in early on. With the extra time this bought me, I called Ren in to assist with the fitting. I've been hoping she'll take over the entire business whenever I can no longer continue here. However, I sent her back upstairs before he woke up, as I didn't think she was ready to partake in the reveal. I led the now blindfolded man by the hand to the mirror to show him his new appearance. "What? No, not this," he roared the moment he caught sight of the look I'd chosen. A man of a similar age with messy, curly brown hair and dark eyes. His new lanky and tall, scrawny body wore a patterned black t-shirt and dark jeans. Change it. Sighing, I shook my head to show my decision was final. This man came to me only a week ago. He told me the story of his friend he had agreed to help, getting her out of an abusive relationship. How devastated he was to find her murdered. Worse yet, the police had dumped it all on him. "I thought you knew him well. This is the man you so easily threw under the bus. The man you insisted was a loser, simply because he grew up poor and had to steal food as a teenager, because he sold a little weed here and there to survive." The man staggered toward me, clearly intending to do me harm in some way. I instinctively reached for the knife in my dress pocket, but the residual effects of the sedative left him weak and disoriented. "I imagine it must be quite humbling for you to not be the one with the power for once. I'm willing to bet your amateur attempt at witchcraft did nothing. Your deceased girlfriend was probably just humoring your efforts," I sneered, gritting my teeth. "You broke her trust in herself. I can only imagine the sheer terror she lived with every day as she believed she was losing her mind." Taking a deep breath, I added, "And then you killed her, taking her out of this world and away from the only person who truly loved her, her best friend. And not even in the way you think he's gay." He begged me on his hands and knees to believe he was innocent. And I did believe him because he exhibited genuine grief and empathy, something I don't think you possess an ounce of. This is a look you don't deserve to wear, but it's the look you need. Now get out of my sight before I do something I might regret. Dazed, he stumbled out of the room and into the front of the shop. I'd unlocked the front door, so he let himself out. Watching from behind the curtain that shielded the entrance to the back room, I watched as a couple of police officers surrounded him. Ren had called in an anonymous tip after we finished stitching him up. He insisted it was a mistake, but he was arrested and taken away. He brought this on himself, and now he would face the consequences. I have many looks in my collection that are too infamous to put future clients in. However, this was one time I used one of them for a good cause. The man he'd framed eagerly consented to the reuse of his look in this manner. Now he can truly live free, knowing the one who murdered his best friend will spend the rest of his life paying for what he did to her, and for the responsibility he tried to evade. Hello and welcome back, my friends, to Fran Hart's Fabulous Frogs and Happy Haberdashery. I hope you've all had a wonderful couple of weeks since we last spoke. I've missed you dearly. Ren and I have been working hard to roll out some new summer styles. The shop floor is packed with bright colors and floral prints, linens and chambray, day dresses and chinos, and Ren just finished the cutest little tropical fish cufflinks. Now, I had a very moving story written up and ready to share with you, but I've been asked to keep it quiet for a while. So don't be surprised if you hear about me elsewhere in the near future. That's okay because, my friends, I have a story for you today. I admit, I may not come across as subtle as I always try to, but I can only hope that you will understand me and my reasons. Ren was just dusting and rearranging the jewelry display yesterday when a customer triggered the front door chime. I opened my mouth to wave her off, The sign had been flipped to closed already, but I guess I forgot to lock the damn door. However, I stopped the moment I caught sight of the woman entering the shop. A cold chill ran down my spine as she paused in front of a white day dress. Square-necked, lace-embroidered, mid-thigh length, with decorative buttons down the front. Very cute, but I digress. After she gave the dress a cursory glance, she walked over to the counter, looking slightly flustered and anxious. The woman was of a similar age to me, early to mid-30s, and had her dishwater blonde hair pulled up into a loose ponytail. A fixed look of fatigue was on her face. The weariness was reflected in her choice of attire, yoga pants and an oversized t-shirt advertising a school fundraiser that she had likely spearheaded. Despite her seemingly harmless appearance, there was something I couldn't quite place. Now I tell you, this was a dangerous person, one with a story to tell that would make anyone's blood run cold. I waved Ren upstairs, though Ren has sat in on a couple of consultations now, even asking a few insightful questions of her own, and most of all my fittings. I didn't want her exposed to the worst of it just yet. "Are you the client?" she mumbled softly as Ren left the shop, locking the door behind her. "Are you FH?" "Oh, it depends on who's asking," I replied with a chuckle as I added, "How can I help you, darling?" I'm interested in a custom fit," she requested furtively, her voice a whisper, even though there were no customers around who would have noticed the sign on the door. "Of course," I responded, pulling back the black curtain and leading her through to the back room. We took our seats and I explained the terms of the transaction to her clearly. Once she agreed, I settled into my chair, my notepad in my lap, ready to begin the consultation. "All right, my dear, let's begin. What brings you here today?" The woman sighed heavily, looking up as if peering into her own mind for the right words. "Well, I recently lost my son," she began, her large blue eyes already welling with tears. She gave a loud sniffle. "I got pregnant pretty young. I gave birth to him when I was 20. His father didn't stick around, so it was always just the two of us." "I am so very sorry for your loss," I offered solemnly. "I can't imagine losing Ren, and I've only been taking care of her for a few years. If you don't mind me asking, what happened?" She glanced back and forth nervously before whispering, "There's, something wrong with my house." Raising an eyebrow, I asked simply, "Oh." "Yeah, I got the house as a gift from my parents when my son was about 5 or 6. It wasn't big or fancy, but they were tired of seeing us in the tiny apartment," she explained before hanging her head. "But if I had known what that house had in store for us, for him, I never would have accepted it. From the moment we moved in, I knew it was haunted." I shuddered at the thought. There are few things in this world that Fran Hart truly fears, and that is definitely one of them. "What kind of spirit are you dealing with?" Pulling the elastic band out of her hair, she let the wavy locks fall to her shoulders before gathering them up to retie the ponytail, laughing anxiously. Usually, I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of light footsteps wandering the hallway. The first few times I was too scared to check. However, concerned for my son, I forced myself to confront the strange intruder. And, well, it was a little girl. At first, I thought it might be one of my son's school friends, Annalise. She had a dress quite similar to the ghost girl's, but the hair was different, and she just wandered around as if it were her own home. I figured it was probably her home in a past life. However, as soon as she realized my presence, she fled into the night. Nodding, I interjected, as ghosts often do. "I count myself lucky I haven't had a chilling encounter. I swear I'd jump right out of my skin." Though fearful of hearing whatever was to come next, I urged her to continue. The girl stopped appearing for a while after that. I thought I was rid of her for good. However, a few months later, I was woken up again by those tiny little footsteps. It was the same little girl, she explained, tightening her ponytail. I mentioned it to my son, not wanting to scare him. I asked if he was sneaking a little girlfriend over for sleepovers. He denied it, of course. He was a good kid, but he didn't see her. He always slept soundly. I realized I was too spooked to have hardly taken any notes. I took her short silence as an opportunity to catch up. "Did she ever go away?" Shaking her head back and forth, she pressed her lips into a line. Never completely, but there were periods when she would leave us alone, and other times she'd appear more frequently. I honestly started ignoring her. She seemed harmless. Maybe she was just confused. However, I realized now my vigilance over the girl was the only thing preventing her from latching onto my son. How so?" I asked with a doleful frown. Tears gathered in her eyes as she undid and retied her hair again. A nervous habit, I assumed. My son started changing. As a teenager, he was moody. He slept all day. He lost interest in church entirely. He would often lash out and scream nonsensical things at me, and then it was like a switch was flipped, and he would sob hysterically about something inside of him he couldn't find the words to explain. I told him he could tell me anything, but he insisted I wouldn't understand. Most people would write this off as normal puberty, but it was more than that. I started to suspect the little girl's spirit was influencing him, godless as the thought was. So the next time I was woken by the sound of footsteps, I snuck out of my room and into the hallway. To my horror, all my suspicions were confirmed. A lump formed in my throat, and my palms started to sweat. I tried to busy myself with frantic note-taking, but the pen was slippery in my hand. "My son, my beautiful boy, she wailed as tears began to stream down her face. He had been completely taken over by the spirit. I didn't see a little girl wandering aimlessly in the hallway. I saw my son in a cheap dress and wig. He froze the moment he caught sight of me. I lunged at him and tried to cast the demon out. I was afraid of the demon, but I was more afraid of losing my son, afraid of my son becoming whatever I saw that night. I grabbed his arm and held him as I ranted at him, talking about the blasphemy of a man dressing as a woman, about defying God by rejecting the body he gave him. A moment of clarity came over him, and I figured it had worked because he just said, "I'm sorry, Mom," and staggered back into his room. My heart somehow both sank and raced, fearful of what was to come next. The woman pulled a tissue from the box on the table, dabbing lightly under her eyes, careful not to smear her makeup. I woke up feeling refreshed. I thought my son would be back to normal because the demon had released him. I knocked on his door to wake him up and received no response. Usually I get a tired groan or an angry, "Leave me alone, Mom," but there was nothing. Worried, I pushed open his door and he wasn't in his bed. No, he was in the closet, still wearing the women's clothes, and he was dead. She breathed out, shaking her head in disbelief, her gaze vacant and detached. He left a letter apologizing for lying to me all those years. He said there was never a ghost girl, that it was always him being his true self, that he had tried to ask for help, but I never listened, that he couldn't tell me exactly what was going on for fear of how I would react. And now his worst fear had been confirmed. He couldn't see himself continuing, and this is why I came to you today. Because I lost my son not only when he died, but so many years before when he chose to defy God. Rumors are starting to spread, and I can just feel all the other mothers whispering behind my back. I need to start over. I need a new identity. Please, Fran, please help me. I clicked my pen shut and folded my arms in my lap. "And that's it, my dear." She nodded in silence. "I have exactly the thing." I pulled out a look that had been tucked away in the deepest corner of the wardrobe for almost 2 decades, a look I thought I would never dispense. The procedure went off without much hitch, and I pulled the blindfold over her eyes the moment she was restitched. When she came to, I led her to the mirror for the big reveal. As the blindfold dropped to the floor, she gasped in horror at her new appearance, a person who appeared to be an 18-year-old boy. Though the previous owner was quite tall, I had to admit the skin was a little small on her. The stitches hadn't completely closed over her chest and hips, gaping and bulging sickeningly to expose the deeper layers. The darkened dermis with its network of nerves and vessels, subcutaneous pockets holding yellow, greasy fat cells. Though initially too stunned to speak, she finally opened her mouth to begin. "No," I roared, clapping one hand tightly over her mouth. "You don't get to say that name." I inhaled sharply to steady my nerves, drawing myself up to stand straight before her so I could look directly down into her panicked eyes. "Now it's my turn to tell you a story," I stated, blinking rapidly to fight the tears I feared would fall. I didn't believe she would listen, so I kept my hand right where it was. "I want you to imagine never feeling comfortable in your own skin. I want you to take the pain and misery you might be feeling right now, and I want you to imagine feeling that way your entire life. That's how I lived, how your daughter lived. I lived in confusion and fear, thinking there must be something wrong with me, simply because my inside didn't match my outside. I fought it for a long time, though I was always feminine. I was even bullied relentlessly for it, especially by you, Chloe." A flicker of recognition sparked in her eyes as she realized the skin she was wearing had once belonged to me. She tried to fight me. I confess I was scared then, scared of my bully. Luckily, she was still dazed from the sedatives and only succeeded in staggering. I grabbed one of her arms to keep her upright. My final year of high school, I decided I wanted to be a seamstress. Knowing this would only intensify the teasing, I kept it a secret. I learned everything I know about sewing and design from the previous owner of this shop, I explained, a deep sense of nostalgia running through my gut as I recalled her. Lady Mercy Abbott, the eccentric but kind and gentle woman who took me under her wing. I was almost out of high school, alive, broken on the inside, but alive, when you followed me here after school one day, and then the next day you brought your cronies and cornered me in an alley and beat me so severely I almost lost my life just as it was about to truly begin. Your friends tried to stop you eventually, but you were so vicious you just couldn't stop. My breath became shallow and unsatisfying as I fearfully recounted the attack I faced, shaking my head at her unfounded hatred. I was lucky to survive, pulling myself by my hands and knees the rest of the way. I collapsed behind the shop where Lady Mercy found me. Only then did I understand what the back room of the shop housed, the nature of her custom fits. She repaired me with her tools and then let me sleep without explanation. I trusted her because she was the only one I could trust. I woke up in this beautiful, wonderful new exterior. To this day, I still look at my appearance with gratitude. I admire my full figure, the curves of my waist, stomach, legs, breasts. I cherish my thick black hair, my heart-shaped face, my plump lips, my bright jade eyes, even the little gap between my two front teeth. I didn't even have to tell her who I was on the inside. She just knew, I breathed out. She knew my secret. The secret I only whispered to myself as I gathered up the courage to try on my mother's lipstick and slip into her high heels. The secret I whispered to myself when I saw my true self start to emerge in the mirror's reflection. The secret I whispered to myself first with shame, then with an overwhelming sense of joy as I introduced me to myself for the very first time. Fran, after all these years, I've learned that looks are only skin deep. I can recall Lady Mercy whispering in my ear as she unveiled my new look with pride. I learned to look deeper, to see people as they are on the inside, and on the inside you are just like me. My voice started to tremble as I added, I was always Fran. I was never the boy you teased, and you never had a son. You had a daughter, and the only thing in that house that was an idea of a boy was the one you refused to let go of. I only wish I could have gotten to her before you did. I released my hand from her mouth to let my arm drop to my side. Don't you see, Chloe? Now you are in the wrong body. Do you even know who you are anymore? God help me. She whimpered, looking past me and at her reflection. God help me that my son would have become a freak like you. That was all I needed to hear. I withdrew the knife from my dress pocket and plunged it into the side of her neck, cutting her words off before that final, horrible word fell from her lips. When I released her arm, she fell backward to the floor, bleeding out to death. I realize many of you might react negatively to me or what I've done now. And I accept that. As much as it might hurt, I'm used to being questioned on the very basis of who I am. All that matters now is I know myself. Even before Lady Mercy restitched me, I knew and loved Fran because I always was and always will be her. And look, I don't advocate for murder, but she nearly took my life in so many ways. Certainly, she left me for dead that day. But mostly her constant denial of my personhood could have ended my life years ago, and tragically, it took the life of her daughter. It was a rushed decision to kill Chloe, so I hope you understand why I need to lay low for a while. I might be back sometime in the future, but for now, I'm on the run. Hope to see you soon, my friends. If you're ever in town, remember to visit me at Fran Hart's Fabulous Frogs and Happy Haberdashery, the little shop where you don't necessarily get what you want, but you always get what you need. And sometimes, just sometimes, you get what you deserve. I joined a support group that promised to heal my phobia. The first participant was terrified of clocks. Since I can remember, I've lived in fear. Actually, fear isn't enough to describe what I feel. Fear is normal, even good. Fear keeps us safe, prevents us from making stupid decisions that we'd surely make without it. Fear helped the human race evolve, evolving with us, keeping us alive. I'm afraid of spiders, afraid of snakes, afraid of falling off a soaring bridge. Things and situations that are truly life-threatening. But my phobia is utterly irrational, and it plunges me into utter terror. To the point where just thinking about it makes my mouth go dry, my palms sweat, my heart race. To the point where just seeing it, I'm immediately attacked by an anxiety attack, hyperventilating, my stomach clenching so much I vomit everything up. To the point where when I'm forced to confront it. I'll tell you about that later because it's not my turn to share now. For years, my phobia has been controlling me. Despite my best efforts to avoid it, I'm triggered by something that sounds so harmless I never know when it's going to hit. My phobia chokes me, terrorizes me, dictates me. Most of all, I'm exhausted by it. to the point where I finally signed up for an intensive workshop that promised to provide the tools to heal my phobia, led by someone who had actually overcome their own fear. I figured I'd tried medication, I'd tried psychotherapy, so what's the harm in trying this? And then I found myself in a room that resembled a Sunday school class in an abandoned church. The space was empty save for a circle of 8 chairs arranged on the peeling white linoleum floor. A line of writing on a whiteboard was the only sign that I had come to the right place. Welcome to my workshop. I'll be in shortly, but it's important to this process that you don't know who I am right away. I'm a firm believer in the healing power of discussing the origin of your fear and how it changed your life. First, we will all share our stories as equals. Then, I will show you how I took back control of my life. Choose a seat and find the paper taped to the underside. We will share in that order. I randomly chose a seat, a little disappointed. It's hard for me to pinpoint a specific starting point for my obsession. It's always been there. It has, however, altered the course of my life, causing me to do things that I regret with every miserable day that passes, so I decided to stay. I reached beneath the chair to find the piece of paper, tore it from the bottom, and read the number. The other participants trickled in after me. Tejan was first, a skinny young woman notable for her deeply sunken cheeks. Immediately upon sitting, she pulled a travel ashtray from her purse and started smoking, and she never stopped. Next was Alex, a conventionally handsome, almost ordinary-looking man, perhaps in his 40s. He nodded a greeting and took a seat 3 chairs to my right, pushing his thick-rimmed glasses up the bridge of his nose. Val, a man so tall he could block out the sun, bald and clean-shaven, looked meticulously put together. He nervously asked Tejan to read his number for him as he settled into the flimsy chair next to her. Eddie, an elderly woman likely close to 90, took the seat next to mine with her coiled gray hair and large string of pearls around her neck. She looked so much like my own grandmother that I instantly felt more at ease having her there. Thomasin was probably the youngest of us, giggling as she sat next to Alex. Her hair was platinum blonde, but the black roots had grown out at least 4 inches, and she wore a full but unevenly applied face of makeup. John, a middle-aged man with thinning reddish-gray hair, walked in with squeaky white tennis shoes. His beer belly was even more apparent as he sat down immediately to my left. "Oh," he spoke up immediately. "What happened to your hand?" I used one hand to pull the cuff of my moss-green sweater down over the stub at my left wrist. Finally, Cecily walked into the room. A stunningly beautiful woman with short black hair, glowing tan skin, and an intricately decorated eye patch over her right eye. She walked towards the circle listing slightly to one side, placing her palm on the chair seat before sitting straight across from me. She tore the paper from the underside of the chair. "All right," she said, turning the open paper to reveal the number 1. "Looks like I'm first up, so I'll just get started then." The group offered no response. If the moderator was among us, they were giving no indication. "My name is Cecily, and well, I have chronotrophobia." She started, her voice clear and confident. Noticing the blank looks on my face and the rest of her audience, she quickly supplemented with the fear of clocks. Don, the man immediately to my left, snorted a laugh through his nose. "Clocks," Cecily shot him a cutting look. "Yeah, asshole, clocks, got something to say," she countered. He shook his head lazily while Eddie offered a gentle encouragement. "You just go right on, dear." "Thank you, ma'am," she replied warmly, her tone a complete contrast to the moment before. Eddie returned a sweet smile. "It started with black spots," she continued. Her leather jacket rustled as she settled back into her chair. Tiny specks of black in my vision, little threads floating everywhere I looked. At first, they were almost unnoticeable. I could only see them when I looked at a white wall, but they quickly became more intrusive. I made a mental note to call the doctor, but I had bills to pay, so I put it off. Figured maybe I'd screwed up my eye with my contacts or something. The black spots only appeared in her right eye. She gestured to her right eye, or rather, the patch she wore to conceal it. The patch was studded with black and white stones with several thin little chains dangling off of it. It was strange and beautiful. I could almost overlook it. Just continued on with my usual routine. She sighed, leaning back in her seat and putting her feet up in front of her. But a few weeks after the first spots appeared, it got much worse. I was at lunch with my dad, joking around like usual, and then suddenly I don't even know how to explain it. It was like a dark curtain dropped over the right side of the world. Nearly half the vision in my right eye just disappeared, blacked out, gone. The young woman with the uneven makeup, Thomasin, gasped. "What happened?" "My dad rushed me to the doctor, and they said I had something called a retinal detachment," she answered, turning slightly to her left to talk directly to her. Basically, a section of my retina, the thin layer lining the back of my eyeball, had peeled away like old wallpaper. Without it, my brain couldn't make sense of what I was seeing, so it just blacked out the area like it didn't exist. I needed immediate medical attention, or I was almost certainly going to be permanently blind. Cecily ran one hand through the short, curly black hair on her head as she continued. I went in for treatment the next day. They numbed me up and put a little metal tool in to pry my eye open while they injected a tiny gas bubble inside. While the procedure was relatively quick and simple, if horrifying, the real problem was the recovery. To ensure the gas bubble would stay in place to push the retina back into place, I had to lay face down, head slightly tilted, for at least a week. The entire time, I interrupted in disbelief. "Yep," she confirmed, nodding slowly, her lips pursed at the end of the word. Tejan flicked her cigarette ashes into the plastic ashtray and took a long drag. "Geez," she exhaled, a plume of smoke escaping with the syllable. Her oversized sweater slipped off one shoulder to reveal the stark detail of her hollow collarbone beneath. My dad was a savior, insisting I stay at his house for the duration of my recovery. "We're very close, especially after my mom left," Cecily revealed with a touch of sadness in her voice. "The first day was awful, my body was so stiff, and God, the boredom was truly unimaginable. My dad stayed with me as much as he could, but still, you just can't know. The second day was unbearable, but the third day was hell. Several members of the group, including myself, leaned forward. Our curiosity was almost palpable." She rubbed her palms over her tight jeans multiple times. For the first time, she seemed slightly nervous since walking in. "Well, my dad settled me to sleep that night. I drifted off. Woke up the next morning, at least I thought it was morning. I had blackout curtains in my childhood bedroom. The room I was in, so I couldn't be sure. My phone was charging on the other side of the room. I laid there for a long while, either waiting to drift back to sleep or waiting for my dad to come in. But he didn't come, and I certainly couldn't fall asleep because of the ticking." A sudden silence fell over the room as Cecily looked down at her lap, picking at her fingernails. No one urged her to continue. I knew we all knew what she was fighting. The anxiety, the nausea, the sheer, crushing dread that surfaced at the mere thought of what you feared most. "The clock in my room, one of those loud, old-fashioned clocks," she stammered, gritting her teeth. "Couldn't see anything in the darkness, and the rest of the house was completely silent, that incessant ticking. It was all I could focus on, just repetitive tick-tock, tick-tock." She muttered anxiously, illustrating her point by knocking her shoe heel loudly on the floor multiple times before stopping abruptly, her eyes wide. She took a moment to compose herself and a deep, shaky breath. As the hours passed, it got louder and louder. I called out for my dad, but there was no answer. I figured it must be the middle of the night, so I tried desperately to force myself to fall asleep. But the ticking, that damn ticking, was mocking me. I lay there for what felt like hours, days, even years, paralyzed by the sound. It sounds irrational, stupid to admit, but I couldn't move because of a clock. Even when I had to use the bathroom, I couldn't get up. There was something about the ticking that terrified me in a way I'd never experienced, freezing me in place. At some point, I realized the sound began to take on a distinct quality. Well, like there was another layer of sound surfacing. The tick-tock rhythm started to sound like clop, 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 and it was coming from above me, perfectly synchronized with the ticking from the clock in the room. Like someone was stomping around in the room above, but it didn't sound like human footsteps. The sound was too harsh, too crisp, not the dull thud of a person. Shaking noticeably, she recalled, "God, I just remember laying there so scared and confused, and thinking to myself that it almost sounded like hooves." And then the sound started to move again, still overhead but a little further away, a little quieter. I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief, but the feeling didn't last because only a few seconds later the sound came back, louder than ever as the tick-tock-clop rhythm reverberated throughout the house, deafening. That's when I realized that whatever was making the noise was coming down the stairs. "Oh God, no," Eddie gasped, placing one frail hand over the lower half of her face. I just lay there in the bed that I had wet, my body drenched in a cold sweat, petrified, helpless, unable to see anything, unable to hear anything but the clop, 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 clop down the stairs, each step closer to me punctuated by that terrifying sound. She spoke rapidly, her hands balled into fists, tapping on her thighs to the rhythm. It thumped its way across the first floor of the house, relentless in its pursuit, until finally it reached my room. The door was slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of light, but I remained on the bed, face down as the sound continued to grow louder, closer with each step until I swear it was emanating from inside me, tearing through my eardrums like thunder vibrating inside my ears, inside my mind. I knew the monster was beside me then, because I could feel its breath on my shoulder, so hot it was almost vapor. All 7 of us were hanging on her every word. The room was completely silent save for Tejan's lighter as she lit another cigarette. Cecily squeezed her eyes shut, seemingly trying to chase the image of the monster from her head. I slowly turned my head, and in the faint stream of light from the door, I saw the bottom half of the monster standing upright on two thick legs covered in thick black hair. It repeatedly flexed one of the two legs to bring a split hoof down on the floor, perfectly in rhythm with the clock. Tick-tock, clop-clop. In that moment, I didn't care if I lived or died, as long as death brought an end to that sound. I rolled out of the bed away from the monster and ran like hell on my numb legs. The beast growled as it started to chase me. I could hear the clop, clop, clop chasing me in the darkness. Somehow, I managed to make it out, and I burst out the door into the blinding light of day which burned my already damaged retina, and then the sound stopped. Just like that, she revealed with a snap of her fingers. Still terrified, I ran up to my dad's room, and I found him lying there dead on the floor. A few of us gasped in response. Thomasin reached across to place a comforting hand on Cecily's. He had a stroke and fell, unable to call for help. Tears suddenly welled up in her eye as her bottom lip trembled. The worst part is that it might have been a slow death. He could have been lying there for hours, she surmised, her voice shaky as she tried to continue. She sniffled loudly. I developed chronotrophobia after that. I lost all sight in my right eye because I was too terrified to go to the doctor, worried I might see a clock. She flipped the eye patch up to reveal a pale, open, opaque eye, a complete contrast to her warm brown left eye. My retina fully detached. I developed a cataract after the surgery. I don't mind it myself, but I cover it because I'm sick of people staring when I finally got the courage to leave the house. I want them to look at something I control, she explained as she set the eye patch back into position. To this day, I can't stand to look at a clock, but more than that, I can't stand to hear one. The ticking of a clock in my hands is just as loud as it was that day in the darkness 3 years ago. Along with the sound comes the memory of that horrible monster, and I feel it chasing me every time I hear it. She fell silent, her hands resting in her lap as she finished her story. And worse than that, the clock ticking carries the brutal reminder of every second that passed while my dad lay dying on the floor. Every second I could have helped him, every second I could have saved his life. I think that's what terrifies me the most. Oh Jesus, Tejan finally spoke, breaking the heavy silence after Cecily finished her story. She used her cigarette butt to light a new one. Her skinny knees knocked together as she crossed her legs. Glad I don't have to follow that. Cecily gave a slight laugh, the sound holding deep sadness while exposing gratitude for being momentarily relieved of the stress. Thank you for sharing, Cecily, Val, the huge man, said warmly, his unexpectedly deep voice echoing. She only nodded in response as her tears began to subside, and a half-hearted, reluctant smile crept onto her face. Who's next? I asked cautiously, anxious about the potential of hearing another harrowing story, but also eager for the group to continue to the end. I was desperate for a little relief, a little sense of control over my life, and clearly I'd have to wait until all 8 of us had shared to get it. The young woman to Thomasin's left, probably in her early 20s, opened her hand to reveal the paper balled into a small, tight knot. She unfurled it with her long, overly aggressive acrylic fingernails to show the group the number 2. Guess it's my turn, she spoke softly, dropping the crumpled piece of paper onto her lap. I'm Thomasin. I offered a comforting smile to the youngest participant. The gesture served to reassure me as well. Take your time, dear. We're here to support you. Thomasin let out a dramatic breath as she settled into a more comfortable position, twisting her neck and rubbing one shoulder while wincing in pain. You can probably tell just by looking at me, she began, gesturing to her hair and her makeup. I have a fear of mirrors called cataptrophobia. Her unkempt appearance suddenly made much more sense with this information. The spotty foundation, the uneven winged eyeliner. The frazzled hair full of split ends, the black roots of her natural hair having grown out in stark contrast to the bleached blonde. A wave of guilt washed over me as I realized I had judged her appearance, completely unaware of the impact of her obsession on her. I always wanted to be a pretty girl, she sighed, shaking her head listlessly. When I was little, I wanted to be a princess, a model, a goddamn Barbie doll, but I was born with darkness in me, with ugliness. I always hated looking in the mirror, but as I got older, I kept looking. I just looked at myself and dissected every point. Flat chest, mousy, dull hair, big, crooked nose. Ugly, ugly, ugly girl, she jeered, her tone of mockery chilling. She repeatedly jabbed one finger into the air in front of her, as if confronting her reflection right now. Cecily interrupted. You are a pretty girl, Thomasin. Thomasin turned to her right to look at her. No, I am not, she cut in sharply. The room went uncomfortably silent for a few moments before she picked up her story where she left off. But my older sister, now she was a beauty, tall, long legs, bright blonde hair, perfect body. She didn't need to wish to be Barbie. She was Barbie. Not only perfect on the outside, she was gentle, kind. I loved her so much. She was my idol. I wanted to be just like her. So when she killed herself, I fell apart. I didn't know who else to look up to anymore. What worried me even more was the realization that if she was everything I wanted to be and was still so unhappy, what hope was there for me? She whispered, tears welling up and collecting on her lower lash line, clumped together from several layers of mascara. I'm so sorry for your loss, Thomasin, I offered awkwardly. It was the least I could do. Dabbing at the corner of her eye with her tight, long sweater sleeve, she nodded, accepting my condolences. Thank you. I was 14 then, she was a few years older. We shared a room. I'm the one who found her hanging lifeless in the closet. I hated myself even more after that. Why did I get to live when she was gone? I started dyeing my hair, painting my face with makeup, trying to emulate her. But I'll never be as beautiful. I still hated mirrors, but the obsession only developed years later. It happened when I was 20 in college, doing pretty well with my grades. I even had a boyfriend, a guy who actually loved me for who I was, thought I was beautiful. She looked off into the distance somewhere wistfully. He knew about my self-esteem issues and really wanted to help me. He said, if only you could see yourself through my eyes, Thomasin. And then he suggested an idea. Alex shifted in his chair, the flimsy seat creaking under his weight. What idea? She crossed her legs at the ankles, her tiptoes touching the floor. She was so petite that her feet didn't quite touch the ground. He was really into hallucinogens, like a spiritual thing, I guess. He suggested we take acid together, that I would really get to know myself, see myself for who I really was, and not the person I was constantly trying and always failing to be. I wasn't too sure, but he insisted and I trusted him. We took the drug, and I didn't really feel anything for a while. I only really realized I was tripping or high or whatever when the patterns on the wall in front of me came alive. The most mundane shapes of lines and geometric forms morphed and moved. They made sense in a way I'd never experienced. She described using an outstretched finger to trace invisible patterns in front of her. The shapes were beautiful, like the universe was talking to me, without words. I started to get a little anxious when the patterns on the wall just kept moving back and forth like an unending pendulum. Thomasin took a long, stuttering breath, composing herself before continuing. My boyfriend found me on the bed. As he walked toward me, I could see the trails from where he had been, where he was going. He put on some music and lay down beside me and held me. It was the most magical experience of my life. She breathed out, closing her eyes, savoring the beauty of the memory. And then he told me I should go look in the mirror. She stammered, swallowing hard. He said I would finally see myself the way he saw me. Beautiful and perfect, just the essence of my being remaining, no looks to distract. Again, I was anxious. I tried to tell him about my complicated relationship with mirrors. But again, he insisted, and again, I trusted him. I walked into the bathroom, connected to the world around me with every touch of my foot to the ground, ecstatic with every step. I'd heard horror stories about looking at your reflection while tripping, so I was pleasantly surprised when I just saw myself in the mirror. Nothing strange, other than my pupils throbbing and my facial features slightly more exaggerated, but nothing horrific. At least not at first. When she paused her story, the subsequent silence felt heavy and suffocating. Tejin's breath of smoke was the only sound that cut through the tension. Burying her face in her hands, Thomasin continued. I finally felt beautiful looking at myself in that mirror. I smiled. I leaned toward the glass, putting my palm up to it. She mimicked the gesture, both hands up in front of her. Happy to be looking my own eyes straight on for the first time when the reflection's eyes began to look different. Reflective like a cat's eyes in the dark and almost yellow. I watched in total horror as my reflection detached itself from me, pulling one hand back into a fist and pounding, knocking right on the glass with the bottom of her fist smiling wide. A huge lump formed in my throat. As I tried to comprehend the horror she had experienced, in that moment I saw myself. Not me, but me. I'm not sure how to accurately explain it. But for the first time I saw past the exterior to my true self, Thomasin stammered, a streak of bright pink lipstick apparent on one of her two front teeth. And then she started to talk to me, to taunt me worse than I ever did myself, calling me plain, useless, ugly. Each word emphasized with a punch of the fist to the other side of the glass. I noticed a flickering movement above. I looked up, and I saw something there moving back and forth. It was a pair of feet suspended in the air, dangling. I was overcome with horror as I realized who. My reflection told me that I would never be as beautiful as she was, as my sister was, so I whispered poison to her in the dark. Every night as soon as the lights went out and we lay in bed to sleep, planting the seeds of self-hatred in her mind until she choked up, her eyes again welling with tears. I tried to scream in protest that it wasn't me, that I would never say those things to my beloved sister, but it came out as a stammer as I suddenly remembered. I remembered my sister softly crying in the dark as those vicious, hateful words just crawled out of me in a barely audible whisper. "You're nothing. You're worthless. Everyone would be better off without you, if you just died." She sobbed, black tears running down her face. Thomasin wiped her eyes with her sleeve, a large amount of smeared makeup staining the fabric. "I was right about one thing, it wasn't really me," she revealed, her voice trailing off as she stifled a sob. I watched, paralyzed, unable to cry out, unable to say anything as my reflection opened her fist, pulled the other hand away from the glass, and began to forcefully pry up a fingernail until the nail bed yielded, and she cracked it up with a shattering shriek. I jumped both at the image in my head and Thomasin's sudden cry. I felt the pain of her action, biting and sharp, as intense as if it were my own body. Even as I looked down at my own shaking hands to confirm my fingernails were intact, she recalled, wrapping her right hand tightly around her left index finger, as if the pain was still there, throbbing and aching. Her tears dried as the sorrow was overshadowed by fear, the kind of terror that can only be escaped through total emotional detachment, her voice now empty and lifeless. And then my reflection grabbed the wounded nail, wiggling it frantically until it was loose enough for her to pull it up, scraping along the back of her finger, peeling it back with a slow, drawn-out movement. The pain was excruciating, but my hand exploded in agony as she completely stripped the finger bare with her other hand. Relentlessly, she continued to viciously tear at the hand. The skin eventually tore down to the palm. She plunged her finger underneath the wound, gleefully burying it up to the knuckle, and then ripped the entire flesh away from the hand, Thomasin explained, her eyes shut tightly. John just said, "Holy shit." The sentiment was echoed by the rest of the group, even Eddie, as all 7 of us nodded in agreement with his vulgar assessment of the situation. A grave look remained on Thomasin's face as she confessed matter-of-factly. "That wasn't even the worst part. What happened next is what haunts me to this day." "What happened, Thomasin?" Alex asked, his brow furrowed with concern for the girl. After my reflection tore the flesh away from her hand, I was expecting to see the inside of a hand, a human hand, but what I saw was so much worse. Instead, another hand surfaced, but it was pale, a sickly gray, and it was completely covered in scales. She stammered with a visible shudder, placing one hand on her stomach as if to soothe a queasy gut. She slapped the new hand flat against the mirror, the barrier between us thin and fragile. As she locked her glittering, amber eyes on mine to speak these words, "You will never be beautiful because I am you, and one day I will be more than you." A suffocating silence filled the room. I stopped my leg from bouncing, an anxious habit of mine, unaware I had been performing the repetitive movement. Val buried his face in his huge hands, his bald head gleaming under the overhead lights. Thomasin took a series of quick, shallow breaths as she prepared to finish her story. I finally felt control of my body return, enough to turn on my heel and run from the bathroom. My boyfriend was incredibly worried about me but tried to reassure me, saying I was just having a bad trip, she recounted before letting out a long sigh. At first, I almost believed him, but I was terrified of mirrors. More accurately, my reflection in them immediately following the event. After I came down completely, I went home and stood at the bathroom sink to wash my face. I looked up at the mirror and she was there, my reflection. With the skin of her arm in her teeth, she tore a long strip of flesh away to reveal the terrible scales beneath. I covered the mirror with a towel, but it didn't help. Every time I accidentally caught a glimpse of myself reflected in a mirror, there was less me, more her. Every second of every day I can feel her crawling out of me. I am in constant pain. I hated looking in the mirror before because I hated how I looked. Now I am utterly terrified of mirrors because they show me who I truly am, what my fate is to become. I've removed all mirrors from my house and I won't go into anyone else's home. Even if they promise to cover their mirrors, I still know she's there, waiting. Even when the mirror is covered, she shivered, hugging herself for comfort. I still hear her pounding, knocking on the glass. The conclusion of Thomasin's agonizing story made my chest constrict, a light film of sweat coating my palms. She had endured such trauma that I was surprised she had even built up the courage to attend the group. Cecily had her own share of trauma related to her obsession, though, and I was sure I had my own. So I could only assume the remaining 5 participants, Don to my left, then Val, Tejan, Alex, and circling back to my right, Eddie, must have similarly horrific stories to share. 2 done, 6 to go. The only question that remained was, who was next? Cecily voiced the question in my head. The question was likely on everyone's mind, all except for the next person in line, number 3. Val, leaning forward with his forearms resting on his thighs and his massive hands locked together, lifted his head to answer. "That's me, I'm up." I glanced at the enormous man, astounding how he could somehow blend into his surroundings despite his imposing presence as he spoke in his deep, warm, echoing voice. The man was probably in his 30s, easily over 6 feet tall, which made the skinny Tejan to his left and Don, a much smaller man to his right, look tiny. He was dressed much more professionally than the rest of us, wearing a white button-down shirt with black trousers and a perfectly tied tie. "I'm Val," he announced as he sat straight up in his chair. I worried the flimsy seat would collapse under his weight. "I have octophobia. I'm afraid of the number 8. "So that's why you asked me to read your number for you?" Tejan asked, letting out a lazy puff of smoke as she turned to him. She gave a hollow laugh as she added, "I thought you couldn't read." Val returned his own half-hearted chuckle, a sudden sadness in his dark eyes. I can assure you that I read quite well. Before the obsession, I was studying mathematics in one of the top postgraduate programs for my field." "And now you're afraid of a number?" John asked incredulously. I shot him a quick glare. The taller man gave a loose shrug in response before explaining. "Well, it's not actually the number itself that I fear, but the shape of it, the figure 8, as it's commonly referred to." He stretched out a long finger to trace the shape, starting at the top, drawing a half circle, then intersecting in the middle, drawing the bottom circle before returning up to complete the top loop where he had started. "I was studying number theory, believe it or not," he mused, lowering his hand to his lap with a soft slap. "Number theory deals with the properties and relationships of numbers, especially the positive integers, meaning whole numbers that are not fractions. So 1, 2, 3, 4, he paused to swallow hard, dryly, and so on. I leaned forward, clutching my left wrist stub with my right hand, frowning. I could sympathize with the fear of something so mundane. "What happened, Val?" He took several deep breaths, in, out, in, out. I wondered how big his lungs must be. "I got too deep into my work, I'll admit," he answered. A shy smile flashed, his white teeth stark against his darker skin. "Growing up, I've always loved numbers. Math was my favorite subject. It only seemed natural that I would major in mathematics in college. I graduated top of my class and went on to get my PhD with a focus on number theory." Opening that letter, my acceptance letter to that prestigious program, it was the happiest day of my life, Val reminisced, looking down at his shaking hands. His soft, deep voice was trembling too, and I thought he might cry any minute. A few years into my graduate program, my love for numbers, well, it developed into something more like an obsession. I loved all of them, but I revered the number 8 most of all. I remember one day I was working on my thesis and I went to write the number 8. I started to draw it and I kept going. Even after I had closed both loops, I redrew it again and again. Val went silent, seemingly caught up in his own tangled thoughts. He shook his head quickly, his sweet smile returning. "Anyway, you get the picture. I realized that the number 8 represented the infinite nature of the universe. I became utterly consumed by that number, the figure 8. I started seeing it everywhere. In the trail, a figure skater left on the ice, the earthworm squirming on the sidewalk after a rainstorm, race cars running around the track, even the plastic ring around the soda can I drank every day. The figure 8 and the frequency with which I saw it, it became a sign to me, a sign that the beauty of life and love were unending. If only I knew then how wrong I was," as the huge man bowed his head into his massive hands. Thomason encouraged, "Slowly, Val, saying it will make it feel better, I promise." Looking up again, he nodded his grim acceptance. I tried to present well my findings to my advisors. Needless to say, they were unimpressed. I had spent all my research time on the philosophy describing the true meaning of the number 8, the secret the ancient mathematicians were trying to convey, whispered in every stroke and curl of the number. I couldn't accept it when my superiors told me to refocus my research. I didn't stop, I just dove deeper until I stopped completing the necessary assignments. I missed deadlines, I stopped attending meetings. Eventually, I was kicked out of the program, but I wasn't disheartened. At least not then, he exhaled, rubbing his smooth, bald head with one large hand. I immersed myself in my research. Everywhere I looked, I saw another figure 8. A pair of glasses on a stranger's face, the handwritten letter S, the orbit the sun travels across the sky in a year. The strokes in a painting connected to form the sacred shape. Each encounter with the figure 8, bringing me closer to infinity, closer to God. He took a shaky breath through his tightly pursed lips, loosening his tie as a sheen of sweat broke out on his glistening forehead. I stayed up for days at a time. I started drinking to sleep every night, because every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was the figure 8. I fell into alcoholism pretty quickly. I sat at the local bar from early afternoon well into the night, preaching the word of the sacred figure 8 to anyone who would listen. Truthfully, not many people, he commented, chuckling through his nose as he recalled his bizarre behavior. One evening I was at the bar, nursing a cheap beer. I was almost out of money then. I impressed the bottom of the bottle on the bar in front of me. As I set the bottle down, a ring on the left and immediately to the right, the condensation left behind formed a figure 8. I was relentlessly tracing the shape with my finger when a man sat down next to me, wearing a black hooded jacket. We talked for quite a while, and eventually, I got into my spiel about the figure 8. As I was drawing the number on the table, the man looked straight at me for the first time, and I saw his face. Val recalled, the memory causing him to visibly shudder. His face was incredibly pale, almost featureless, his mouth small and surrounded by thin, barely there lips. His nose was almost flat, but his eyes were the most terrifying. They were unnaturally close together, meeting over his tiny nose bridge but only just enough, intersecting at a point in the middle of the two eyes. My eyes traced the outline. A figure 8, he stammered, spraying a mist of spittle as he struggled to produce the sound chaotic and difficult. Val paused to wipe his bottom lip on the edge of his perfectly clean shirt sleeve. His professional attire stood in sharp contrast to his demeanor, as he quickly became a deeply anxious, stammering version of himself that I never expected when he first walked into the room. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I was drunk, but I know what I saw, he asserted strongly, throwing his open hands out in front of him, as if he expected the group to attack or disparage him at any moment. You have no reason to worry with me, dear, I believe, Eddie reassured. I nodded my agreement to her statement, as did the rest of the group. We all knew the power of fear, the uncontrolled might of obsession. They can play tricks on the mind, make you see things that aren't there, or rather, turn something harmless into a catastrophic version of itself, into something that demands immediate escape. He was visibly calmed by the collective response. His shoulders relaxed, his facial features softened. Thank you. Anyway, I knew what I saw, and the figure 8 formed by his eyes terrified me, a stark contrast to the euphoria it had brought before. My reaction was both confusing and distressing, but all I knew was that I had to get out. I practically flew out the door, my unfinished glass of beer sitting on the table. I even left my card at the bar. I never went back for it. I should have called a taxi, but the combination of drunkenness and panic rendered me incapable of coherent planning. I jumped in my car and set out on the familiar road home. Not a long drive, I figured I'd be fine, especially since, strangely, there were no other cars outside. Somewhere along the road, however, the route became, well, much less familiar. There was an intersection in the road, an intersection I had never seen despite driving through it practically every day. I figured it must be a new construction since there were no stop signs or traffic lights or anything, he explained, shaking his head in disbelief. I cautiously slowed down, stopped, and continued. I reassured myself that I was almost home, just a few more minutes. But where the road should have continued straight toward my house, a sudden slight right turn appeared. Drunk and disoriented, I followed the new turn and continued driving, suddenly noticing the unusual curvature of the road. The roads I know are fairly straight, now forced me to crank the steering wheel slightly to stay on course. Val grew more frantic, his eyes wide, his hands waving as he spoke rapidly. And then somehow I was back at that intersection. But from a different direction, I rolled through it and followed the strange curve of the road to a slight left turn. That shouldn't have been there, it was wrong. But I was drunk, I needed to get home, sure that I would be fine if I just made it home and lay down. So I turned and continued until I found myself back there, back at the bar. Tejan gasped, an involuntary reaction as she took a drag on her cigarette, smoke escaping in uneven bursts as she wheezed and coughed dryly. After her coughing subsided, Val cleared his throat into his fist. The man in the hooded jacket was standing outside, waving, adding to my panic. I slammed the gas pedal to the floor, telling myself, this time I'm going to make it home. This time it will be normal. This time I will be okay. But I didn't really believe any of that. My fear was confirmed when I reached that intersection again, drove through it, saw that right turn that skewed the normal route, back to that intersection again, then the left turn, and then back at the bar. I had to go around the loop several times before I realized I was driving in a figure 8 pattern, the shape I had essentially worshipped for years. The thing I thought was the meaning of life itself. It was infinite, but not infinite in joy and beauty as I had always believed, but infinite in a terrifying, monotonous trap that sent me into a panic, desperate to escape like a trapped animal. I followed that route over and over again for what seemed like hours. Eventually, I lost all desire to live. If death meant an escape from the trap I found myself stuck in, I would gladly accept it. I sped up, weaving in and out of the lanes until I reached 90 miles per hour. I swerved. My tires screamed as I took a sharp right off the road and plowed headfirst into a tree. Alex's mouth was wide open. "I'm surprised you're still here with us today." Val gave a self-deprecating laugh, a rough, harsh sound, a patch of sweat having spread under his arms during his fervent storytelling. "I actually died, but I was revived after the homeowner where I crashed called for emergency services. I had multiple broken bones and a severe head injury. I fell into a coma. Even when I woke up, I was completely unresponsive to my surroundings for a while. My little sister visited me every day, staying with me and caring for me in small ways. I eventually recovered, not fully, of course. I moved in with my sister when I was finally released from the hospital because I needed help remembering things sometimes. One day, she asked me what I saw when I died, when I was in a coma, when I was awake but unresponsive." The first tears welled up in his dark eyes as he added, "I told her I saw light, that I was surrounded by infinite love and warmth. My sister is a woman of faith. I told her what she wanted to hear, because I couldn't bear to break her heart. I couldn't bear to tell her what I really saw, what I know now lies on the other side of this life. The reality is when I died, I saw nothing." Val revealed grimly, then laughed despite himself. "Somehow I was finally right about the meaning of life, the universe, all of it. It's an infinite, never-ending figure eight. But like that road, it's endless in its monotony, in its nothingness, in its loneliness, in its darkness. When I knew what happened after I first woke up in that hospital bed, my obsession with the figure eight was solidified. While I was locked in that residual nothingness, the darkness from the moments I was dead, conscious but only just. My sister told me that I wasn't looking at her like a normal person when she talked, or if she walked into the room. Instead, my eyes, they were darting around the room, repeatedly tracing. The figure eight, he stammered, digging his fingernails into his palms as he began to softly cry. Since then, my reverence for the figure eight has been completely replaced with anxiety, panic, and horror. I'm a complete hermit. I keep to myself and mostly stay in my room. Because any time I see the number 8, I'm thrust back into that darkness. I only realize it when my sister finds me sometimes hours later and jolts me back to alertness. I only realize then that I've been drawing the shape of the figure 8 with my eyes, lost in the endless void it represents. "Huh?" Don said simply with a short, dry chuckle, despite his cavalier attitude. His face was visibly flushed, leading me to believe he was actually quite rattled by Val's story. He gave me the feeling he was the type of man who kept his emotions at a distance. A man from a culture and generation that was required to repress fear or anxiety, any weakness. "You guys have got some of the most specific fears I've ever heard of, really," he added, briefly flashing the piece of paper to the group to reveal the number 4 scrawled on it. "Me, I'm simple, I'm Don, and I have nyctophobia. I'm afraid of the dark." I had to admit I was shocked by his admission. The fear of the dark is certainly common, but I never expected it from a guy like Don. Leaning slightly to the left, I eagerly awaited his story. Given his rather crude remarks so far, I figured he must have a good one. John folded his beefy arms across his chest, just above the belly that protruded from his white polo shirt. "I've been afraid of the dark since I was a little boy," he began. "I know it's a pretty normal thing to be afraid of when you're little, but I wasn't just afraid, I was terrified." Cecily shrugged, adjusting her eye patch slightly. "I understand. I don't like being in the dark either after what happened to me." Several of the other group members nodded in agreement, the fear of the dark being almost primal. The stocky man returned the gesture, shrugging his broad shoulders. "I figure you guys would understand that for me it was much more than that. With most kids, you just give them a nightlight and, well, problem solved. But not for me. As soon as the sun started to go down every evening, I turned on every light in the house. I couldn't sleep over at friends' houses, couldn't go to the movies. Hell, I was even afraid to close my eyes sometimes," he explained, shaking his head as he gave a weak smile, looking down at his lap, seemingly almost embarrassed. Needless to say, this drove my parents crazy. My old man would constantly complain about how I was making the electric bill so high it was driving him into poverty. I get where he was coming from now, but as a kid all I could think about was how scared I was in the dark. "Anything could be lurking there just waiting to devour me the second it could," John commented, balling one hand into a tight fist as he finished his sentence. Now, my parents weren't exactly the coddling type. Therapy wasn't an option in my family. So after a few years of tolerating my nonsense, my dad decided to take the problem into his own hands, he continued, his voice carrying a touch of melancholy that I hadn't heard from him before. He picked me up while I was kicking and screaming and locked me in a closet, turned off the light, and locked me there alone in the dark. Alex leaned back in his chair, startled. "That's horrible, Don." Don waved his hand in an exaggerated shrug, clearly finding it easier to dismiss his own feelings rather than admit the pain his father's actions had caused him. "Yeah, I mean, that's just the way he was, that's just the way things were," he replied nonchalantly, rubbing a hand across his thinning, reddish hair, which was graying and sparse with age. "Anyway, I was in that closet for hours, probably, screaming and crying until I was exhausted. Then I just sat down, hugged my knees to my chest, and waited for him to let me out. I sat there in silence for a few minutes when I suddenly got the feeling that I wasn't alone. I couldn't see, of course, so I couldn't know, but I knew, if that makes any sense. I just sat there frozen in fear, telling myself my mind was just playing tricks on me, until I felt something long and sharp drag across the length of my arm. I heard a quick, shallow, hissing growl. I started screaming again and pleading with my parents to let me out, and then it slashed me. Thomasin tilted her head to one side, her under eye still slightly stained with runny makeup. "You mean you actually felt it?" she asked. He gave a slow nod in response, letting the implications of the silent confirmation sink into our minds. A clear unease settled over the room, enveloping us. It clawed me hard down my forearm before my mom finally took pity and let me out. I scrambled out of the closet and slammed it shut behind me. I didn't talk for days afterward," he exhaled, gritting his teeth. "Of course, my old man insisted that I had done it to myself just to get out. And I mean, I couldn't see anything. Maybe my mind was just playing tricks on me, causing me to do it to myself. I can't know. Regardless, I wasn't going to risk it from then on." As I grew older, I didn't grow out of my fear of the dark like most kids, but it became manageable for a while as I entered adulthood. I still had to sleep with a light on, but I wasn't worried about it all day like I was as a kid. The red-headed man gave an awkward laugh, his pale green eyes anchored as the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes crinkled. As you can imagine, a grown man afraid of the dark. Well, that didn't make it easy for me, romantically. He admitted, his naturally rosy cheeks turning a deeper shade of red. Eventually, I met a girl who accepted me in my strange fear. We fell in love and got married pretty quickly. Her name was Rachel, and she was, well, the light of my life, as they say. With Rachel, everything was easy. I was still scared, but I felt safe with her. For the first time in my life, I was happy. So when she suggested I take her camping for our 1-year anniversary, of course, I agreed. I was worried about being out in the dark, but she reassured me there would be a full moon. We'd build a campfire, bring lanterns, and of course, I'd have my flashlight with me at all times. John covered his flushed face with his hands, a simple gold wedding band on his finger, swollen on either side of the ring, as if he had gained considerable weight since first putting it on. I should have known to stay home. I should have known what I had to lose out there in the dark. As Val placed a large hand on Don's shoulder, Don flinched away from the comforting gesture. Tejan exhaled a large cloud of smoke into the middle of the circle. "Take your time, Don," Eddie offered gently, again providing her soothing presence to the group as Don removed his hands from his face to place them on his lap. A few moments passed before he continued. We drove out to this campsite. It started raining right after we set up camp, but Rachel was so excited. I couldn't bear to ask her to leave. I tried to hide my anxiety by staying close to the lantern, and I actually felt okay since it was a fairly bright night once the rain passed. After a few beers, we got into the tent to go to sleep. I could feel her pride in me. I woke up alone a few hours later. I don't know what happened to Rachel, but I grabbed my flashlight and took off into the woods. I could hear something out there. Afraid that Rachel might be lost or injured, I went deeper into the woods, following the sound of breaking twigs, crunching dry leaves, sweeping the flashlight beam back and forth. He explained, the pace of his story picking up as he turned his head from side to side, as if he were still in those woods, still looking for his wife. John took a sharp breath through his clenched teeth as he recalled. And then my flashlight beam started to flicker. The battery was dying. I frantically swept my remaining light around, and in the disjointed flashes of light, I finally saw it. The thing from the closet all those years ago. The thing from the dark. It was slightly shorter than me, incredibly skinny. Its bones jutted out, pressing against its paper-thin, pale skin covered in a sparse layer of thin, white hair. When I finally caught a glimpse of its face, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. Until I heard that quick hissing growl, a shallow sniffing. It had no eyes, but beneath where they should have been were two big, deep black holes cracked at the edges, a pair of gigantic nostrils. At the very bottom of its face, where a human chin would be, was its mouth, perpetually open, gaping, drooling. It ran quickly on two legs, but its arms, well, they were something else entirely. At the elbows, each arm grew from the pale flesh into bony protrusions, each ending in a sharp point with smaller spines jutting up and down each side, giving it a near serrated look. I shuddered at the thought, pulling my sweater close to my body, as if the temperature of the room caused the reaction, sticking my hands in the pockets of my khaki shorts. He continued. The flashlight's light finally died completely. I looked up at the bright night sky for relief and watched in horror as the star directly above me flickered and died. The surrounding stars each followed suit until the moon's light itself suddenly died, leaving me in absolute blackness for the first time since the closet. But so much worse. That's when I heard Rachel scream. I ran toward the sound of her voice, tripping over fallen trees in the pitch black, low-hanging branches whipping me in the face. I finally reached her, calling out to her, and she shrieked back in response. In the dark, I couldn't clearly see what was going on, but here's what I was able to piece together afterward. I heard the monster's growl. It seemed it had pinned her down, one of its sharp limbs impaling her shoulder in the forest ground beneath. Grabbing my large hunting knife, I plunged the blade into the source of the sniffing. The monster shrieked, releasing her, the knife lodged somewhere in its back. I reached down to help Rachel up, half carrying, half dragging her as we ran through the darkness. The quick sniffs and growls following closely behind us until we saw the light at the edge of the woods, our campsite clearing. The red-headed man's face was pale, his eyes reddened as he fought back tears. We stumbled out of the woods into the clearing where, instead of our campsite, we found two stunned strangers, two men. Rachel wrenched herself out of my grip, falling to the ground and crawling on her hands and knees toward them, wincing in pain when her left hand touched the ground. Her arm was nearly severed at the shoulder where the monster had pinned her down. She pleaded with the two men for help. "Please help me, he's crazy." "He tried to kill me," Dawn sobbed, tears falling as he finally succumbed to the agony. "She wouldn't even look at me. I'm so grateful she didn't die that night, but I lost her completely. I know what I saw, but of course I sounded like I had completely lost my mind. I was committed to a mental institution for a while. Eventually, I just told them what they wanted to hear, just to get out." Over the years, I've replayed that night in my head. Was I really crazy? Did I really hurt my wife? Or was the monster real? Rachel could never explain why she was out in the woods that night, insisting I must have chased her out there and stabbed her with my knife. The knife that I had plunged into the back of the thing was never found, he sighed, wiping a tear along the back of a beefy forearm before rubbing his forehead with his fingertips. His mind tired from working on a problem he'd probably spent a decade trying to solve, a problem with no clear solution. "I used to be afraid of the dark because I was afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows with me," he sighed, biting the inside of his bottom lip. "Now I know what lives in the dark, but there's something about the darkness that terrifies me even more than that sickening beast. I think the thing that scares me the most about it is not knowing what I am capable of in the dark, not knowing what I am in the dark." I want to take a moment to thank you all for the insightful feedback you've given me so far. I've shared some of your comments with the other members of my support group, and many of them were incredibly moved by your kind words of encouragement. For those of us who live controlled by constant fear, being able to commiserate with people we've never met, or even just being shown common kindness, can be a rare thing. We've spent most of our lives being dismissed by people, being told to get over it. Constantly reminded of the irrationality of our fear, we're known by the people we love most, the people we crave acceptance from. Family, friends, lovers, partners, spouses disregard the lengths we go to avoid encountering what we fear most. In some cases, they take extreme measures to try and fix us, in many cases making things much, much worse. I think of Don, a little boy with bright green eyes screaming and crying in the pitch black of a locked closet, and I tear up thinking about it now. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I want to jump ahead and share with you the situation I'm in now that the cure has been revealed to me. But it's still important to this process that I follow the order assigned to us from the very first moment we sat down in that empty classroom of the old abandoned church. It's important that I honor the stories that came before mine because they fundamentally changed my life. Now, that means I have to circle back to participant number 5. "All right, enough of that," John commented just moments after finishing his story, his demeanor immediately shifting from distraught to his normal nonchalant attitude. He leaned back in his chair, putting his feet up in front of him. The tattered white tennis shoes squeaked on the linoleum floor. I was suddenly reminded of my own father, who would wear a pair of sneakers until the soles were nearly worn through. A true if it tain't broke don't fix it kind of person. "Who's next?" I was startled by a sound immediately to my right. Eddie cleared her throat multiple times. "I believe it's my turn," she mumbled, opening her paper to confirm that she was indeed participant number 5. The elderly woman appeared to be at least 90, although I only based this assumption on her striking resemblance to my own grandmother in the years before she passed away. The same coiled gray hair, the large string of pearls around her neck with matching earrings, the sweet, gentle smile, and the almost melodious rhythm in her voice that had been comforting me throughout the group session so far. She had the same frail hands with paper-thin, pale skin that barely concealed her bones, veins, and the joints swollen with arthritis beneath. The only major difference between them was the black tracksuit she was wearing. My Ruth wore pastels and bright colors. She always said black was for mourning, not for life. Eddie tucked the paper back into her pants pocket before introducing herself. I'm Obedience, but all my friends call me Eddie. I have bathmophobia. A mischievous smile crossed her wrinkled face as she waved her finger at Dawn, clearly joking. And before you judge, Dawn, I'm not afraid of bathing deer. The group erupted in laughter with Dawn joining in. So what are you afraid of then? Val asked. The sound of his warm, deep voice signaled the group to quiet down like a professor. The elderly woman waited for the laughter to completely subside before answering. I'm afraid of stairs. I nodded. I can see why a person your age might have such a fear. A fall down a flight of stairs would almost certainly result in a broken hip or worse. Now, I know what you young ones are thinking. An old lady like me is naturally afraid of the stairs. One slip and I'm off to the hospital. If I'm lucky, I'm wearing my life alert, she commented with a wink. I've been afraid of stairs since I was a little girl. I was truly the only child with this obsession that the family doctor had ever encountered at the time it first appeared. Although when I was a child, I believed I actually had climophobia, the fear of climbing stairs, not just the stairs themselves. But we didn't have all these different names for everything back then, she continued, raising a thin eyebrow. But clearly named or not, I was terrified of climbing stairs. When I was about 10, I took a horrible fall down the stairs in our family home. I grew up wealthy in one of those old money families, so we had those huge marble stairs with multiple landings coming down from the upstairs. I was playing at the top of the stairs when I lost my footing and tumbled all the way down. Oh my, I practically broke every bone in my body, but it could have been so much worse. It took what felt like decades to recover. For a child who couldn't do much more than lay in a bed, it was miserable. But I was a strong little girl nonetheless, and I got well. Mostly, that is. Peeling the 100th cigarette she had lit since arriving, Tejan lifted her deep-set eyes to meet Eddie's. Your body recovered, but your mind never did it? Eddie pointed one index finger back towards her. You are correct, dear. I refused to go up or down those stairs. My father would force me, but I would get dizzy and anxious the second I put my foot on the first step. My mind irrationally inflated the steepness. Climbing that set of stairs felt the equivalent of climbing up the side of a nearly vertical mountain face. From there, well, it was all downhill, she stated, looking down at her lap, shaking her head softly. I couldn't go back to school, so my mother homeschooled me. I lost all my friends. All I had for the rest of my childhood were my books, the garden, an overwhelmed mother, and a father who thought I was damaged goods, useless. The gray-haired woman sighed deeply as she contemplated the sudden turn her life had taken at such a young age. Thomasin broke the silence, speaking up, You're not useless. Thank you, dear, Eddie replied warmly, folding her hands neatly in her lap as she sat up straight. When I became an adult, there was a lot of controversy around the house about what I could become with my condition. My parents wanted me to marry a wealthy, well-positioned man, but no one would have me. So when the mailman saw me outside in the garden and we took a liking to each other, my father told him, his voice mixed with the smell of whiskey, If you want her, you can have her. Cecily snorted a laugh from the other side of the circle. My exact sentiment. I gave a slight laugh in return. We got married and we had a fairly decent life. He didn't make a lot of money, but he worked hard. We cared for each other even though we grew distant over time. At first, he was very supportive of my obsession. But as we grew older and as my parents passed away, one after the other, he insisted we move into their home, the one with the marble stairs. He was tired of working his tail off and wanted a little comfort. I reluctantly agreed. She recalled the anxiety surrounding the agreement palpable. At first, everything I needed was set up on the ground floor, but eventually he wanted to move into the master bedroom on the top floor together. I worked tirelessly to overcome my fear, not wanting it to control me anymore. For months, he held me as I took the first step, then a few, then finally the whole flight of stairs. Although I have to admit, the first time I made it to the top, I threw up right on the floor. Laughing despite herself, she shook her head lightly. I was still a little anxious and dizzy each time, but as long as my husband was with me, I could finally climb those damned stairs. A look of confusion crossed Alex's face. It sounds like you mostly overcame your obsession then. Why are you here? Her eyebrows furrowed, the lines on her forehead deepening into a grim expression. Because it came back about 5 years ago, but much, much worse. Much more, she answered gloomily, wringing her hands together so tightly I feared the thin skin would tear. I woke up late one night alone. My husband wasn't the type to get out of bed in the middle of the night, so I was immediately worried. I sat up in bed and noticed a faint light spilling in from the hallway. I went to investigate and found that the chandelier was on, the one that illuminated the stairs that curved beneath. And then my husband emerged from the shadows of the hallway and pushed me. I gasped involuntarily. No. I fell down the first set of steps to the landing, she answered, her voice soft and chilling. I heard the sound of my husband's bare feet slapping the marble steps as he came down after me. I decided to pretend that I had lost consciousness, and when he reached me on the landing, I grabbed his ankle and pushed him down. I watched him fall down the remaining steps, although I couldn't see him at the bottom because of the turns of the staircase. Now, I knew he had just tried to kill me, but I wasn't about to just leave him there to die, my body aching. I stood up again. I looked down at the steps that I had been able to descend for years then as they suddenly became grotesquely steep, with each step at least several feet deep, clinging to the railing with both hands. I slowly took the first step, pausing momentarily to regain my composure and continued. My hands were slick with sweat. My grip on the railing was precarious, but I continued until I reached the second landing. That staircase had 3 flights of stairs with 8 steps each and 2 landings in between. I knew this for a fact because I had learned to count every single step to keep myself calm. Now, I was at the second landing. I knew that the second I turned the corner, there would only be 1 more flight of stairs, and then I would be at my husband. Imagine my horror, however, when I turned the corner to take the final flight of steps. I couldn't see my husband at the bottom, nor could I see the end of the stairs as another landing appeared. And then, well, another new step opened up at the bottom. Thud, 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 thud. 7 more steps, quickly following one after the other. A new 8-step flight down to yet another new landing. Eddie squeezed her eyes shut, inhaling through her nose and exhaling through her pursed lips. Probably a learned coping mechanism for anxiety. Still, I continued onward, afraid for both my life and my husband's. Down what should have been the last flight of stairs and onto the new one as the loud sounds of new steps falling into place reverberated throughout my home again. My husband began to moan, began to cry, pleading for help, asking what happened. I called down to him that there had been an accident. He muttered for a few minutes and then started screaming. "Obedience, you goddamn useless piece of shit. Get down here now." She spoke the words in such a malicious, hateful voice that I could barely believe it came from her. I tried to explain what was happening, but the words wouldn't come to me, and as I continued down the stairs, more and more steps appeared, increasing exponentially. The incessant, deafening thudding sounds until I felt infinitely tall. But when I looked back, the stairs continued to stretch so far behind and above me that I couldn't even see the top anymore. The chandelier was only a distant glow like a star in the night. I continued my descent frantic and hysterical, trapped in this endless staircase labyrinth, while my husband alternated between gently pleading with me and screaming at me, insulting me, ordering me to hurry up and help him. Until it was finally almost dawn and I finally reached the bottom. I was drenched in sweat, my legs trembling from exhaustion, and my husband was silent. The elderly woman began to softly cry as she continued. I ran to the phone to call for emergency services. The ambulance arrived soon after, and as they opened the door, I realized it was daylight. Looking back at the stairs, I realized I had spent at least 12 hours descending 24 steps. My husband was dead, craving some kind of connection to my family. I looked into my family history soon after my husband passed. I discovered that my great-grandmother, Obedience, whom I was named after, died after a fall down those very stairs. Rumor had it that her husband pushed her to her death. After my own husband pushed me that horrible night, I was convinced it was true. Now I know that my husband wasn't himself when he tried to kill me. When I pushed him down, he looked confused, she explained, pulling a tissue from her pocket to wipe her tears. I have been terrified of the sight of stairs. Since then, I can't climb stairs, let alone look at a set without instantly breaking down in a panic. I don't know if any of you believe in fate or anything of that sort, but I believe it's my destiny to die the way my great-grandmother Obedience died, broken and bloody at the bottom of the stairs. I've survived twice now, and I don't think I'll be so lucky again. I owe you all an apology for how long it's been since I last updated you on the progress of the support group. I must confess that as we draw nearer to my own story, I feel that familiar anxiety return. I have done terrible things because of my phobia, and it will be so difficult to receive these events with all of you who have shown me, and others such kindness. I shared some of your comments with Eddie, who was incredibly moved by the empathy shown for her grandmother. I can only hope to receive the same, even though I know right now I don't deserve it. Next up was Tegan, a young woman so thin she was almost emaciated. Late 20s, I'd guess, with a perpetually burning cigarette fixed between her fingers or lips, with sunken cheeks and deep-set gray eyes. It was difficult to imagine she had eaten a full meal in at least the last year. Threadbare, dishwater blonde hair and brittle nails yellowed from constant exposure to cigarette smoke further cemented this assumption. An oversized sweater drooped off one bony shoulder, and a pair of yoga pants clung to her protruding knees. The bottom of the pants were messily tucked into a pair of Ugg boots. "I'm Tegan," she said after lighting another cigarette, dipping the end into the flame of a cheap lighter. "Before I start, I want to make one thing clear. I'm sure you think you have me all figured out. Look at her skinny ass, she must have an eating disorder. She must be afraid of food." As she mocked repeated every assumption I'd had running through my head, a sense of guilt washed over me. I wondered what preconceived notions others had about me, about my missing hand. When the group remained silent, she chuckled sarcastically. "Yeah, I know. And while those two things are technically true, at least to an extent, that's not why I'm here and it's not what you think. I have choking phobia, the fear of choking," she clarified, sitting ramrod straight in her chair. I couldn't imagine how easy it was to sit for that long considering her severe lack of body fat. "I have an eating disorder, but I'm not anorexic. I have sleep-related eating disorder." "SRED," she explained, drawing air quotes with a pair of bony fingers on her free hand. She took a drag off her cigarette before continuing. "I basically compulsively eat in my sleep. I don't know what I'm doing at the time. Genuinely have no idea what I'm doing, and I usually forget when I've had an episode. Although sometimes I have this scratchy feeling in my throat the next day, as if I'd choked on the food. Considering how fast these episodes are, only about 10 minutes total, I wouldn't be surprised if I am choking on the food on the way down. I only really remember completely what happened when I get out of bed in the morning, only to find my kitchen completely ravaged. I mean, pots everywhere, empty snack and candy boxes strewn all over the kitchen, goop pooled on the floor mixed with leftover crumbs from my uncontrolled feast." She sighed, smoke puffing from her pale, cracked lips as she flicked the ash. "And I eat the strangest things. I chugged a whole bottle of sriracha, massive amounts of peanut butter spooned out of the jar with my bare hands, even things I'd never imagine eating during the day. I'm a vegetarian, but in my sleep I ate my roommate's raw sticks of butter. A whole jar of mayonnaise," she recounted, nauseated at the thought. The idea made my stomach churn too. The thin young woman inhaled her cigarette, the end glowing hot. I eventually moved out on my own, a combination of feeling disgusted with the animal products I had eaten and the shame I felt trying to explain my disorder to her. I packed up my things and my pet rat, Rex. She was interrupted by Thomasine flinching from across the circle. As the group turned to look at her, she flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry," she spoke softly. "I don't like rats. Their tails they just give me the creeps." Tegan narrowed a look at her. "Rats are actually very smart, kind, and social creatures. They make great pets," she commented with a slight disappointment in her tone. "I listened to your weird story. Now you can listen to mine." Thomasine nodded sheepishly, her face red. "I'm sorry." As Tegan steadied her nerves with another long, drawn-out drag, Eddie reassured, "Go on when you're ready, dear. We're all paying close attention." "Thank you," she replied, turning towards the old woman but blowing the smoke out the side of her mouth, avoiding Eddie's direction. I moved into my own place fairly soon after the first episodes. It's actually fairly common to develop this disorder in adulthood. I tried to control it. I did all the right things. Sleep studies, medication, therapy, even fucking hypnosis. She described with a bleak laugh as she tapped the end of her cigarette on the ashtray. None of it worked, so I eventually gave up and tried to change my environment to manage the episodes as best as I could. I cleared the pathways to the kitchen and locked up all the knives to at least be safe. Then I locked all the food away every night to make it harder to get to. "And guess what?" she asked emphatically, her gray eyes a little wide, half-circled dark circles prominent beneath. "It actually worked. No more waking up to a messy kitchen. No more shame or embarrassment. No more losing control. No more episodes." She stubbed out the cigarette in the ashtray, dropping it into the container below before retrieving a fresh one to repeat the endless process. "But I seemed to forget the most important thing," she declared cryptically with the cigarette clamped between her teeth. As she paused to flick the lighter, Val asked what she meant. Tegan took a couple of quick inhales to create an even burn before answering. The food wasn't the problem, I was the problem. I woke up one morning with that familiar rough feeling in my throat, but relieved to find the kitchen was clean. I unlocked everything to make breakfast, actually enjoying the feeling of morning hunger for once. Then I went into the spare room to let Rex out to play for a bit, but found his cage open and he wasn't in there. I started to panic until the acidic, pungent smell of vomit crept into my nose. I followed the smell to the corner of the room and that's when I found him. Now, if you're sensitive to animal suffering, I completely understand. And you might want to step outside for a few minutes, she warned, glancing around the circle to see if there was any movement or reaction worth stopping for, flicking a column of ash from the far end of her cigarette. When we remained still and silent for several moments, she continued. I found my dead rat in a pool of vomit. His poor tiny body was mostly intact, but his small bones, they were crushed. She choked up, tears welling in her deep-set eyes. "Oh, Tegan," Cecily cooed, as the thin young woman buried her face in her free hand and began to sob. "I'm so sorry." She shook her head slowly in remorse before regaining enough composure to continue the story with several more long, shaky drags of her cigarette. And then the memory came to me just like it does with all my other sleep-eating episodes in the past, as soon as I found the evidence. I remember opening his cage, pulling him out by the tail as he screamed. I remember him scratching the inside of my mouth in terror, until I bit down on his precious little head, she cried, her breaths rapid and shallow. I started to swallow him whole until the wriggling tail triggered my gag reflex as it slid down my throat. She sniffled, pausing for a moment to wipe her eyes and take a drag. That's when I started to choke. My eyes were watering. I dropped to my knees on the floor, dry coughing and retching. The sudden lack of oxygen was suffocating and sent me into a panic. I put my fingers down my throat to grab the end of his tail, pulling him out in several heaves. The hair on his furry coat tickled the inside of my throat, and the jagged pieces of broken bones scraped up the sides until finally, I pulled him out. I threw him on the floor in the vomit, and then I just went right back to bed completely unaware of what I'd just done to my beloved companion. She wailed, the love for her pet obvious. The food wasn't the problem, I was the problem. I should have locked myself away. Alex let out a large sigh, reflecting the obvious tension in the room. I felt like I was going to be sick but kept my composure out of respect. If she had done this deliberately and willingly, it would be a different story. But throwing up my breakfast on the floor wouldn't help her heal. Tegan stubbed out the cigarette in the ashtray. I was surprised when she continued speaking instead of taking a break to light another. Since then, any solid food I eat triggers that same retching reaction that makes me choke, and with it, the memory of what I did, the fear of what I might do. She sighed, blinking back a second wave of tears. I've completely isolated myself from friends and family, unwilling for them to see how my body has changed, unwilling to explain to them what drove me to be this way. I smoke to curb my appetite. I know these habits could kill me, but I know I deserve to die. Anyway, I sleep in a small, locked room every night, and I only consume liquids. The fear is so strong I have to strain all my liquids through a sieve before I can drink them. She explained somberly, clasping her bony fingers together in her lap. Because if I eat any solid food, not only will I choke on them right then and there, I'll wake up in the middle of the night gasping for breath, only to drag Rex's crushed body out of my throat all over again. I extend my deepest gratitude to all of you for your kind words of encouragement. Although she is still not entirely sure she deserves it, I can only hope that after reading this part, you will still kindly accept her thank you from me. Even if you hate me, please remember that I am only the messenger for the others. Don't take your anger out on them. They did nothing wrong. I knew this moment would come, but when I began sharing these stories with all of you, I didn't realize how uncomfortable it would make me to expose my shameful past to a crowd of anonymous individuals. Maybe it's because I've started to think of many of you more as friends than strangers. In a way, you've all become an extension of my support group, and I need you more than ever. My hands are shaking as I type these words because it's my turn now. As Tegan finished her story, a large lump rose in my throat, followed by a sudden surge of anxiety. It was comforting to listen to the stories of others to know that I wasn't alone in my fear, to understand that others had lost so much or been driven to extreme circumstances because of fear. However, from the first moment, I read the message on the whiteboard. I knew that I didn't belong there, didn't deserve to be there. My heart pounding, I stood up from my chair with such haste that the flimsy legs scraped against the linoleum floor, the harsh sound breaking the silence. "What is it, dear?" Eddie asked, craning her neck to look back at me, a look of both pity and confusion on her wrinkled face. I just shook my head again, the fear having robbed me of speech. "Is it your turn?" Val asked, frowning, the tie still loose around his neck. Nodding, I began to tremble. I was afraid the tears would soon burst forth. "Please sit down, we want to hear from you," Alex said softly. "You don't understand," I choked out, blinking back the tears. "I shouldn't be here. I don't have some tragic story like yours. I'm just afraid." Cecily leaned forward. The embellishments on her eye patch caught the overhead light, sparkling brightly. "We do understand, perhaps more than anyone else. It's okay to be afraid. We all are," she reassured. The rest of the group nodded to affirm her words. "Something brought you here today, just like it brought the rest of us. Your phobia is controlling your life. Talk about it. Please, we want to know." Something in her voice and the anxious look in her one visible eye calmed my nerves. I sat down in my chair, nodding as I replied, "Okay, I'll tell it. I'm warning you up front. This story does not make me look good at all, but it was the lowest point in my life. I'm putting my trust in you. I'm Evana, but everyone calls me Eve. I have trypophobia, the fear of clusters of small holes bunched together." "Isn't that just something you millennials made up?" John asked, the mischievous smile on his face reminding me not to take him too seriously. Chuckling lightly, I returned his smile. "I've heard it all. Yes, it was named fairly recently, but like Ed said earlier, we don't always have names for things that are actually very much real," I retorted, rubbing my hands along the coarse denim of my jeans, sweat having formed in my palms. Furthermore, there's research that supports that there might be an evolutionary basis for trypophobia. Some venomous animals carry similar patterns as the cluster of holes of, say, a honeycomb or coral. The mention of my triggers brought a mental image of their shape, the thought of the dense holes harmless yet inexplicably awful. My skin began to itch, first the back of my head, then my neck. My phobia doesn't just trigger fear, it gives me the creeps. As if I can feel the holes on myself bubbling with an itchy infection, the irritation unsatisfiable. I pushed up the sleeve of my moss-green sweater to scratch my nails along my forearm, fully exposing my missing left hand for the first time since I'd sat down. "I've been afraid since I was a child," I continued, clearing my dry throat. "My parents didn't really know what was wrong with me, and neither did I just knew that I couldn't stand the sight of a pomegranate. I couldn't wade in the tide pools near my home. I couldn't do anything without worrying about what I might see. As a kid, I had no friends, not even feeling close to my family. As an adult, I eventually went to therapy. I learned several coping mechanisms that helped somewhat, but mainly just to stave off the anxiety. And even then, if I was blindsided, it was too late." I sighed, a deep pit forming in my stomach. I eventually turned to drugs to self-medicate. Stimulants, tranquilizers, I didn't care, just anything to redirect my focus. And nothing did that for me like meth. I glanced around the room to gauge the group's reaction to this admission. I didn't expect anything but the disgust and hatred I'd faced at home. My mom yelling through tears about the life I'd thrown away. Strangers sneering with upturned noses as I lay withdrawing on the beach. However, there was no sign of disapproval from the rest of the circle. Their attention still completely focused on me, their shallow nods urging me to continue. When I was on meth, something would capture my attention, and I could focus on that instead of my own unfounded fear. I'd scrub the sink of my motel room for hours. I'd sit down and write the book I always meant to write. I'd discuss a topic of conversation until it was completely exhausted. I explained with a flash of sadness as I recalled the effect the usage had on me at the time before everything went downhill. I had a friend, he was my dealer at the time, that I used with. The memories came flooding back instantly, a monotone buzzing, a sharp pain, a crashing below, but somehow above all of that, the holes. Steadying myself with a deep breath, I clarified. "I can't say that I remember much about what we did together, but I know I cared about him and we were close as two people can be, with their heads always in the clouds, never returning to the ground." Tears welled in my eyes as a craving washed over me, a desperation for a time before all this guilt. A couple of years ago, I woke up to a message from him saying that he had just picked up from a new distributor and wanted to try it out with me. Of course, I agreed, and we set a time to meet up at our usual spot, some cliffs overlooking the ocean. I jumped in my car and headed over as it got dark. When I got there, he was already in the parking lot, sitting in the bed of his truck as he carefully tapped some white powder onto a discarded plate. Out of all things, I sighed, shaking my head with a sad laugh. I sat down beside him as he used his ID card to drag the powder into 2 thin lines, the same old tired ritual. He offered me the first one and then he finished the second. And oh, I stated simply, emphasizing the short sentence with a sharp inhale through my teeth. The high was like nothing I'd ever experienced. The rush came on instantly, and it was so intense that I thought for a moment I might be overdosing. I remember thinking that if I was dying seemed pretty great. Of course, I was just high as hell as I had been hundreds of times before, but I realized pretty quickly that something was wrong. We hopped over the guardrail blocking pedestrians from the cliffs, probably about 6 feet of rock before a steep drop-off to the ocean. Everything was normal for a few minutes, or at least our version of normal, which was pacing back and forth rambling about some random topic, as if we discovered the truth behind anything from toasters to why women's jeans have such small pockets. I reminisced, chuckling bleakly at a past version of myself that I was so ashamed of. And then I started hallucinating. A loose gasp escaped Thomasines' lips. "What did you say?" I scratched my short nails across the stump at the end of my left arm, inflamed with imaginary irritation. It's not uncommon to hallucinate when you're on meth, mostly auditory. I'd never had a visual hallucination until, that night, I breathed out, glancing around the circle to absorb the obvious pity that would almost certainly end soon. I'm sure you're all familiar with the sores meth users can get. My friend, he had them pretty bad, all over his face and hands mainly. They'd never really triggered me because they were flatter wounds rather than holes. But high out of my mind that night, I noticed that his sores started to expand a little and then sink in, hollowing out until his skin was dense with a massive cluster of holes. Tears welled in my eyes. I clenched my jaw tight. Eddie placed a thin hand on my knee and offered gently, slowly, "Dear." That was all it took to push me over the edge. The tears started to stream down my face. I just wanted the story to be over then, just as I do now. I've carried the shame of my actions in secret since that night, and I still struggle under the weight of an immense guilt that I know I deserve. I dried my face on my sleeve before pulling it under my nose, wishing I'd brought tissues. I needed it all to end, so I continued. I just stared at him, more at the holes than at him. As my anxiety increased, skyrocketing into fear, the stimulant that I had willingly taken, I don't even know for sure it was meth, wasn't helping. The pits in his skin got deeper, bottomless, silencing me. That's when I noticed something, wriggling out of him. I groaned, the nauseating image returning with its full power. The first one came out of his cheek, a gigantic maggot swollen to an enormous size. The edges of the sore strained as it squeezed its chubby, pale yellow and black speckled body out of the hole to writhe on his face. Another came right after from his chin, another and another and another from his neck, his shoulders, his forearms. They just kept coming, hundreds of them, until I could barely see his face anymore, and his arms were covered in the disgusting things like a pair of writhing sleeves. The maggots began to burst open as flies exploded out of their shriveled bodies, molting as the empty casings fell to the ground, piling up at his feet. I crouched down to vomit as my friend asked what the hell was happening. When I looked back at him, he was obscured by a swarm of flies. I whimpered, the deafening buzz of their collective noise piercing my ears. Hundreds of them were extremely large, each about the size of an egg. Maybe with coarse hair on their swollen, segmented bodies, flying on paper-thin wings towards me. In that moment, everything felt too real. I would have sworn on my worthless life that I believed these parasitic flies would lay their eggs inside of me next if I didn't stop them. Several others were completely pale. I think some of them might be sick soon. "Calm down," Alex asked. "How did you stop them?" Eve succumbed to her distress, letting the tears flow freely, although I doubt I had any real control at that point. As I was desperately swatting the flies away, I saw that the maggots were still carving their way out of him, escaping from inside his body to transform into the monstrous flies. An endless cycle that would end with these things inside of me, that would end with holes on my body. And I couldn't have that. I was fully in fight or flight mode. I pushed him backward and he stumbled to the edge of the cliff. One more push and he would fall. I only realized when I collapsed to my knees, the rough rock scraping my exposed skin, that he had grabbed my left hand. Dangling over the edge of the cliff, he looked up at me. Although I could barely see him through the veil of flies, barely think past their incessant buzzing. And he begged for help. "Motherfucker," Tegan drawled, stubbing out her cigarette before lighting another. The smell of old smoke, combined with the intrusive memories of the terrible night, made my head spin. "What did you do?" I locked my eyes to the worn floor, unable to face the group. I frantically looked from the swarm of flies surrounding his face to the steady stream of writhing maggots crawling out of his arm and then to his hand. It seemed to have melded with mine. Our fingers had melted together to form one long segment of a shared arm, and the holes were starting to spread to me. I could have helped him up. I should have, but I started to feel a writhing beneath my skin. I reached into my back pocket and gripped my folding knife, snapping it open and placing the blade onto my skin. And then I started to saw back and forth. I winced, tears dropping onto my lap as I recalled the feeling of the knife grating against the bone. I understand how ridiculous it sounds, but I was completely out of my mind. The pain was unimaginable, but the worst part was him. He was begging for his life with every slice of the knife until I cut through the bone and gravity tore the rest of my hand away with him as he plummeted to the dark ocean below. Squinting, I dug my fingernails into my palms. The amputation was cleaned up at the hospital. I told them I just did it to myself, not exactly a lie but cowardly. When they realized I was a meth user, they didn't ask too many questions. I fled town and moved out here, cleaning up my act as much as I could. My friend's body was discovered days later, but my hand was nowhere to be found. It was ruled as a death by accidental fall. Turns out the police don't really care about addicts, I commented bitterly. Although I know I'm the only one who can truly be blamed, I don't have a reason to justify my fear, and that's what makes me feel the worst. All of your phobias stem from something, mine was just always there, although it got so much worse since the night I lost my hand. Before this happened, I never truly understood what made me so afraid of clusters of holes. I mused, cradling my remaining limb in my hand. Now I know that I'm less afraid of the holes themselves, and more afraid of what's inside them. As I described my own journey with fear yesterday, I held my breath, anxiously anticipating the criticism that I truly believed would come. To say I could finally relax for the first time since this all began, since I began sharing the group's story with all of you. As the kind, understanding, compassionate comments slowly came in, I breathed the deepest sigh of relief. Being recognized as human despite the horrific mistake I'd made was the greatest gift I could have imagined. From the bottom of my bitter heart, thank you. I began posting these stories here knowing that eventually I would share with all of you the peace I have found since attending this unconventional support group. Staying true to the process, I've outlined each story without disclosing which one of us was the narrator so you could understand each participant without preconceptions. We've been through 7 stories together, only one left to go. After the energy of my story settled, I glanced a couple of seats to my right. I looked at Alex, the final participant. He was a handsome man in a conventional, if not bland, sort of way. Probably in his early 40s with a fashionably cut chestnut head of hair and a meticulously groomed beard. A pair of thick-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of his nose, pale blue eyes watching intently behind them. He wore a navy blue Henley with the top button undone and a nice pair of dark-washed jeans. I couldn't glean much about him, based on his appearance, so I was curious to hear his story. Noticing the sudden attention, Alex chuckled. "Yes, I'm the one," he started, stopping to correct himself quickly as Val straightened up on the other side of the circle. "I'm the last one." He adjusted his seat, his posture perfect. "My name is Alex. I think my phobia is universal. Perhaps the one thing most people fear most, although certainly not to the degree that I fear it," he commented, rubbing his thumb along the hair covering his sharp jawline. "I have autophobia. I'm afraid of being alone." "Oh?" I nodded, agreeing with his initial claim. Most people are indeed afraid of ending up alone. Several others chimed in too. "I had a somewhat unusual childhood," he stated, shaking his head back and forth. "I never knew my father and my mother was extremely overprotective. Looking back, I think she was just desperate not to lose me after she lost him. Understanding this now doesn't change the fact that I was the only child I knew who wasn't allowed to have any privacy. I shared a room with my mother. She insisted on homeschooling me, and I wasn't allowed to go outside alone. Ever." Tegan gave a lazy laugh, her deep-set eyes half closed, a half-smoked cigarette clamped between 2 fingers. "Damn, dude, how did you survive her?" Alex laughed loudly at her. I didn't really understand how unusual my experience was as a child, but as I got a little older, maybe 10 or 11, I became frustrated. I saw the kids playing outside on television. Kids playing together without their parents in sight. He mused incredulously, looking off as if the concept were still novel to him as it was decades ago. I tried to push the boundaries a little, but she doubled down on her control, insisting she was only trying to keep me safe. I know it all sounds strange, but she was my mother and I loved her, so I obeyed her, although I never really stopped trying to get that little bit of freedom. he admitted craftily. I didn't drop the subject completely, but I knew she would never let me just be a kid if I kept bothering her about it. I waited until my 12th birthday to ask her to let me ride my bike around the neighborhood alone, instead of around the driveway with her, watching me from the lawn chair on the front porch. I pleaded, I begged, I cried, and finally she said yes. Don's jaw dropped open. You mean you didn't ride a bike alone until you were 12? He shook his head slowly in reply. No, and honestly I was surprised she even let me go. I could barely sleep the night before my birthday, knowing that I would wake up on the most exciting day of my young life. He recalled. First thing in the morning, I reported to my mother and then ran to the garage to retrieve my bike. She watched from the window in terror as I rolled down the driveway and down the street. For the first time in my life, I was completely and absolutely alone. He said, his thick eyebrows knit together as he emphasized the last word. I felt the wind in my hair and I could finally focus on my thoughts. I'm pretty sure I ate a bug, but I didn't care. I was about halfway through my carefully planned route when I felt something yank me. Oh my God, Eddie muttered, placing both thin hands on the lower half of her face. Nodding, Alex clarified. I tumbled off the bike, scraping my elbows and knees as I rolled onto the sidewalk, spraining my ankle. On the ground next to me, I saw two large, dirty, bare feet. Terrified, I scrambled to see an older man with wild, unkempt gray-black hair staring down at me. An inverted cross was etched into his forehead, the symbol of evil. I remember my mother telling me with a hairline drawn onto his haggard face. He leaned down to me and said, "Hey kid." Alex explained, mimicking the stranger's voice, menacing and grave. I didn't really know what to do, so I stammered something out, telling him that he could take my bike if he wanted to. He just snorted, spitting a thick wad of phlegm onto the sidewalk before telling me that he didn't want my bike. He wanted me. Needless to say, I panicked. I jumped to my feet as fast as I could and then ran for my life. But I had hurt my ankle pretty bad in the fall, so I moved slowly. The man followed behind me, screaming threats at me, his voice slurred. I'm gonna get you, kid. I'm gonna cut off your little dick and drink your blood. I'm gonna sacrifice your body to Satan. Thomasine flinched as Alex repeated the stranger's hysterical words. His face was flushed and his eyes bulged. Alex paused to take a deep breath, his expression and complexion returning to normal. I mostly outran him. I burst through the front door and into my mother's arms, crying too hard to struggle to explain exactly what had happened. When I finally could explain, she muttered something about the Satanists in the neighborhood causing trouble. She offered to retrieve my bike so we could go together another day. But the damage was already done. He sighed, shaking his head somberly. I didn't want to ride my bike anymore, so I mostly just stayed inside. I was sitting in the living room watching television a few weeks later while my mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner. I heard a rustling behind me and saw that same stranger barely concealed in the bushes outside the window. Staring at me through the glass, he winced. I refused to be alone after that, ever. My relationship with my mother somewhat changed, with me clinging to her more than she'd ever clung to me. I'd follow her around the house, moving rooms when she moved. I started climbing into her bed, every night unable to sleep even just on the other side of the room from her. I wouldn't be caught alone again. A silence fell over the room. Cecily urged gently, "And then what happened?" Alex shrugged his broad shoulders. We lived like that for a long time. She got sick a few years ago. We tried to fight it, but the disease progressed aggressively. I took care of her through her final years just as she had for me all my life. The night she died, I sat by the bedside while she slept peacefully. She woke up and took my hand in hers and then looked up at me as she said she needed to tell me something. I told her that she could trust me with anything. She squeezed my hand as she said, "Sweetheart, I really messed you up, didn't I?" I shook my head. No, told her she was only good to me, but she cut me off, and that's when she told me. Alex breathed out, rubbing his palms together in obvious anxiety. The morning of my 12th birthday, she hired the strange man to terrorize me, paying him extra to come back. Afterward, he revealed, "What?" I blurted out, frowning. The man nodded before adding, "She told me she'd heard about these satanic cults, unable to tolerate losing me or seeing me harmed, so she scared me out of my independence. She apologized profusely, insisting it was all for my safety, but I was overcome by a sudden fit of rage. I grabbed one of the pillows on the bed and I smothered her." Val buried his face in his hands, his elbows resting on his knees, the shock obvious. Alex glanced around the room for several moments, measuring our reactions. For the first few minutes after she died, I was exhilarated. The feeling quickly changed as I became incredibly lonely, followed by that familiar fear. I kept her body in that bed, trying to pretend like she was still there with me, but the companionship of her dead body wasn't enough to soothe my fear. And when she started to smell a few weeks ago, I had to get rid of her. But the loneliness and, more importantly, the utter terror has only gotten worse since then. A large lump rose in my stomach, and that's why I invited all of you here today. He confessed with a shrug, because this is me controlling my fear. I know my mother tricked me, but she was right. Just listening to your stories today, I'm more convinced than ever that the world is a dangerous place, especially when you're alone. With all of you here, I'll never have to be alone again. Cecily scoffed, crossing her one-eyed, patch-adorned arms across her chest. You can't be serious, she objected incredulously. The man locked eyes with her in a chilling gaze. I can assure you I am absolutely serious, he replied flatly. Thomasine cried out and sprang from her seat, but Alex stopped her by clamping her forearm in a tight grip. Sit down right now, he ordered through gritted teeth, yanking the girl back to her seat. None of you are leaving this room. I've secured the building entirely. We have everything we need to survive here, Alex said softly, a feigned tear having slipped down his face. You can't make us stay here. He chuckled at Eddie's statement. Can't I? You've all given me everything I need to ensure you stay put. I have the intimate details of each of your fears, and I will use them against you. John stood up abruptly, kicking his chair over. The hell I will, Alex. I'm not being kept like some goddamn animal, he seethed. I'm getting out of here, and I advise all of you to follow me. The heavyset man turned towards the door, his worn tennis shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. As he moved toward the exit, Alex drew a pistol from his waistband and aimed it at Don's back. No, I cried, but it was too late. 3 gunshots rang out through the room, the sound deafening. Staggering forward, his legs buckled as he dropped to his knees. He twisted his head over his shoulder, stunned and in shock. You've got to be kidding me, Don mumbled before collapsing face forward onto the floor. John, Cecily screamed, jumping out of her seat to help him, although it was clear that there wasn't much any of us could do for him. We had willingly left our phones outside the room to ensure privacy. Hesitantly, I crept across the room to join her, watching the gun for any sign of movement. When I safely reached Don, the others followed soon after. We formed a circle around him, mourning together the fallen man that we barely knew. Alex walked toward us slowly, chuckling as he pointed at the wounds torn through Don's upper back. Hey, do those holes scare you? We stayed in that room for months under the watchful eye of Alex. He buried Don in the churchyard where he had buried his mother before we arrived there. Cecily attempted to escape several times, but he wasn't lying when he said he had secured the old church. The surrounding area was remote anyway. Each time she tried to make it outside, Alex would lock her in a closet, alone with only a clock. The sound of her screams broke my heart. While Cecily became more audacious in the face of her captivity, I became meek, silent, subservient. Evidently, this was a trait Alex found appealing because he favored me. Seeing that I never resisted and having one less hand to fight with, Alex grew to trust me more than the others. He allowed me small allowances for my obedience. A pen and paper so I could write the book I always meant to write. A packaged pastry after dinner. The opportunity to feel the sun on my face for a few minutes in one afternoon. The chance to harvest the apples in the yard, when the branches were heavy with fruit. Alex held the basket while I plucked them. As the basket filled, I withdrew my folding knife, the one I had used to sever my own hand years prior. The one I had hidden as soon as Alex had dragged Don's body out of the room from my pocket and repeatedly stabbed him in the neck. He tried to fight back, but he wasn't prepared. I was ready. I had been bracing myself for that very moment since Don fell to the ground. Alex, I cooed as he lay slumped on the grass, surrounded by bruised, fallen apples. You'll never have to be alone again. The first time I killed someone, it was an accident, and I was consumed with guilt. The second time I killed someone, it was deliberate, and I felt absolutely nothing. I freed the remaining members of the group, but we haven't gone home. As if any of us had a true home to return to anyway. We came here out of a final desperation for normalcy. We came here because our fears had taken everything from us, our family, our friends, our sense of safety. We decided to stay here instead in a place we could adapt to suit our needs. With people who understood the need to do so in the first place, Thomasine gleefully smashed the bathroom mirror to silence the incessant tapping. I helped Eddie board up the basement door to block the only staircase in the church. Cecily crushed every single goddamn clock in the building with her heel. Tegan turned the broom closet into her bedroom. She thanked us as we locked her in every night. We searched the building for the number 8, destroying every single one for Val. If he finds another one somewhere, One of us is always close by to pat him on the shoulder, bringing him back to us. We dug up Don's body, freeing him from the darkness beneath the ground. We burned what was left of him in a catch basin for later. We laid him to rest in the base of a glass lamp that we always keep lit. The light will never go out for Don again. We buried Alex in the yard beside his mother. We couldn't decide whether this was kindness or punishment, but it seemed fitting. My phobia may be harder to accommodate, but C holds me until the anxiety passes. Whenever I get triggered, the decorative gemstones on her eye patch touching my face as she presses soft kisses on my lips. We've been living here for a year now, only leaving for necessities. I understand this may not be the ending you expected, but I want you to know that we are happy here. Cecily isn't tortured by the incessant ticking. Thomasine doesn't have to hide from her reflection. Val isn't losing time. Eddie can finally walk around comfortably on solid ground. Tegan doesn't have to fear what she will do beyond her awareness. Don will eternally rest in the light, and I have all of them. I wake up to Cecily's radiant smile every morning. I share cigarettes over tea with Tegan in the afternoon. I tell Thomasine she is beautiful every day. Sometimes I even let her do my makeup. I spend hours in conversation with Val, whose intellect is unmatched. Eddie makes me BB and water for our daily happy hour. I've built a relationship with her that fills a hole in my heart. The hole that formed when my own grandmother died before I stopped using drugs, before I could tell her how much she meant to me. I place my hand on Don's lamp to absorb the warmth radiating from inside it before I go to sleep every night. So please don't feel sorry for me or for any of us. We are not trapped here anymore. We choose to stay. Here we are safe from the world, and the world is safe from my sin. Together, we've built a world where we can support each other forever. Together, we've built a world without fear.